Chapter 1368. And Lin was a man of few words, and he immediately unleashed his attack. A palm-sized flaming palm whizzed toward the heavenly wolf monarch. It wasn't very large, but it was extremely condensed and imbued with the true intent of his wings of true fire. Even a return to void final stage mighty figure would find it difficult to defend against this attack. Furthermore, the heavenly wolf king was only a return to void intermediate stage exalted immortal. And Lin's simple palm was like a falling meteor, twisting space and incinerating all things. The heavenly wolf king was struck by a sense of life or death peril. It's over. The heavenly wolf king felt as if the space around him had been sealed, and he wouldn't be able to evade this palm in a short time. At this moment, the poison master instantly appeared before the heavenly wolf king before pulling out a strange piece of wood, which instantly transformed into a circular shield. This was his life-saving trump card, the divine tree vital shield, which could defend against attacks from the power of the divine Tao. Boom! A violent collision erupted. Wood splinters flew through the air as waves of flames swept through the air, knocking down all of the surrounding guards. The poison master was shocked to discover that his divine tree vital shield had been set ablaze. You're using a piece of wood to defend against my flames? How interesting. And Lin looked down upon the heavenly wolf king with a cold smile. The poison master and the heavenly wolf king were just about to flee when they discovered that the space around them had been completely sealed, making it impossible for them to escape in a short time. In other words, their lives were now in the hands of Lin. The two of them had once done whatever they wanted to everyone else, but now they were just meat on the chopping block. The heavenly wolf king's expression became extremely dark. White-robed, exalted immortal, are you not afraid that the immortal king will track you down and kill you? I have no vendetta against you, so why are you trying to kill me? I do indeed have no vendetta against you. And Lin stood in the air like a proud heavenly god as he looked down upon the heavenly wolf king. But heavenly wolf king, you're taking advantage of your good relationship with immortal king Feng Wuya to commit atrocities and commit atrocities. 5 years ago, the White Spring District royal family was unable to provide resources to the immortal king palace in a timely manner, and they massacred all of the males of the royal family, imprisoned tens of thousands of female servants and concubines of the Leaping Wolf Mansion, and tortured them to death. There are still tens of thousands of women in the Leaping Wolf Mansion who have been tortured. And Lin's voice reverberated throughout the world. Everyone in the Leaping Wolf Manor looked up at the man in the sky. All the women kneeling on the ground, whether they were dancers or singers, were also staring at the dazzling man in white. The heavenly wolf demon king's expression changed again. What does what I've done have to do with you? I, the white-robed, exalted immortal, hate bullying the weak the most. I want to seek justice for those women who have been persecuted. And Lin shouted, you actually risked being discovered by the immortal king to reappear in this world for some insignificant slaves? Are you crazy? It's not worth it. The heavenly wolf king looked at Lin as if he were looking at an idiot. And Lin spoke with a serious expression, no, it's worth it. They are not insignificant slaves. All of them are more precious than a bastard like you who kills women for pleasure. I'm willing to fight for them. And Lin's words were powerful and forceful. Countless women kneeling on the ground had tears streaming down their faces as they looked up at the man who was like the sun. Not only was he enshrouded by divine flames, but also because his words were like sunlight illuminating their entire world. They were members of the White Spring District royal family, and they were already as lowly as dirt, living a life of darkness where no one knew when they would die. But now, this white-robed, exalted immortal dared to oppose the most powerful being on this continent and come here to save them. That's all I have to say. Die, trash. And Lin raised a single arm, and boundless fire energy converged on his arm as he launched an almighty fist. Heavenly Poison Devour. The poison master chanted in a low voice as poisonous mist erupted from his body, which transformed into a massive black, corrosive mouth that pounced toward Lin. Wolf King Blood God Strike. The heavenly Wolf King let loose an almighty roar as his hands transformed into heavenly wolf crimson claws, which descended upon Enlin. All of the surrounding cultivators felt as if they had been plunged into hell, and even space itself was being torn apart by this terrifying attack. There was no way out for them now. They could only fight to the death. Enlin's expression remained unchanged as his fist pierced through the air before crashing into the massive black, corrosive mouth, instantly incinerating all of the poisonous mist into nothingness. Before the fist energy arrived, it landed on the heavenly wolf blood claw. The terrifying force caused the heavenly wolf blood claw to crack inch by inch. In the end, the fist struck the poison master and the heavenly wolf king, tearing their bones and flesh apart. Boom! A gargantuan fist imprint appeared on the ground of the palace. Amidst the fist imprints were the mangled bodies of the poison master and the celestial wolf king. Even though they were still hanging onto their last breaths, they were already on the verge of death. The white-robed, exalted immortal had once again demonstrated his invincible combat prowess by defeating the two most powerful beings of the Leaping Wolf District with a single punch. All of the cultivators who had rushed over to provide reinforcements all faltered with astonishment on their faces. There were hundreds of powerful beings, but not a single one of them dared to charge forward. This was a man who could even battle an immortal king. No one wanted to live too long. The poison master and the heavenly wolf king panted heavily as they lay on the ground, and each and every breath they took caused their wounds to throb with excruciating pain. I've heard that the poison master and the heavenly wolf king enjoy torturing women to death, and they've invented over 100 different ways to do so. I really can't bear to let you die so easily. Enlin descended from the sky before making his way toward the poison master and the heavenly wolf king. You didn't think that this day would come, did you? A smile appeared on his face, but his eyes were filled with cold indifference. The poison master and the heavenly wolf king were struggling to even move, and they looked up at Enlin with resentment and deep horror in their eyes. Enlin glanced at the wheel of fate nearby with a smile on his face. How about this? I'll give you a chance as well. You can spin that wheel of fate and let it decide your fate. How about that? The poison master and the heavenly wolf king's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Even though there were over 100 types of torture on the wheel of fate, there was still a chance for them to survive. Enlin placed the wheel of fate before the heavenly wolf king. The heavenly wolf king extended a mangled arm and spun the wheel with all his might. Never would they have thought that after torturing over 10,000 women to death with the wheel of fate, they would be punished by the wheel of fate one day. How ironic was this? The wheel of fate quickly spun before slowly coming to a stop. There were only 2 words on the wheel of fate. All of them. All of the onlookers drew sharp intakes of breath upon seeing this. Wow, congratulations. You're in luck. And Lynn applauded. You'll get to experience over 100 types of torture. No, impossible. My wheel doesn't have that. The heavenly wolf king spoke in a hoarse voice with horror on his face. You're bullying us. The poison master wanted to commit suicide. And Lynn chuckled coldly. Of course I'm bullying you. On this day, the blood-curdling cries of the heavenly wolf king and the poison master reverberated throughout the entire palace. The two of them had committed the most heinous crimes, and after being subjected to over 100 types of torture, they finally lost their lives. The white-robed, exalted immortal had slain hundreds of palace guards on his own. He had rescued over 20,000 female slaves and concubines. News of this stirred the entire divine source continent. Chapter 1369. The deaths of the heavenly wolf demon king and the poison master allowed all of the women who had been oppressed to finally vent their frustrations. 20,000 women were currently in a place isolated from the rest of the world. They all looked at the white-robed man not far away. The man who had given them a new life now looked so dazzling and desirable. However, the man suddenly turned around and asked a very strange question. Do you have a good impression of me? All the women were taken aback by his words. The white-robed, exalted immortal was a handsome, powerful, and gentle man who fulfilled all of their dreams. So how could they not be attracted to him? The women blushed and nodded, expressing their good impression of him. Some of them were still trying to decipher what the white-robed exalted immortal had just said, and their hearts were racing. Could it be that the white-robed exalted immortal was interested in them? Such a gentle and powerful person, who was also their savior. If he really took a liking to them, some of them actually didn't have much resistance. However, the white-robed exalted immortal's next words brought them back to reality. Your escape has offended the immortal king's rule, so you can live here in seclusion for now. I'll leave for a while. After a while, I'll let you obtain true freedom. And Lin said again, true freedom. These words touched the hearts of the women again. White-robed exalted immortal, where are you going? The green-robed woman stepped forward and asked with a worried expression. And Lin turned to look at the women behind him with a smile. I'm going to save more people, then kill immortal King Feng Wuya and restore order. Her words touched the hearts of the women again. When they looked forward again, the white-robed man was nowhere to be seen. The white-robed exalted immortal really is a true dragon, a woman said with an entranced expression. Immortal King Feng Wuya is the only powerful being on this continent who has progressed to a completely new cultivation base. Will the white-robed exalted immortal be able to defeat him? Don't overthink things. Even if the white-robed exalted immortal can't defeat him, he can still get away. Let's wait for his return. He said that he would come back and set us free, so he will definitely come back. Yes, we believe him. The 20,000 women quickly rekindled their hope and threw themselves into a new life. Back in the Leaping Wolf Mansion, they had already survived the days where they could be tortured to death at any moment. Now, it could be said that they were living a blissful life. What else could they be dissatisfied with? The story of Enlin rescuing 20,000 female slaves and concubines who had been persecuted spread like wildfire across the entire Divine Source continent. It caused a sensation across the entire continent, and it became the topic of conversation for many people. This matter was actually very commendable. Many people were actually very dissatisfied with what the Celestial Wolf King had done. There was no lack of powerful exalted immortals who hated him. However, when they thought of the relationship between the Celestial Wolf King and the Immortal King, they did not dare to make a move. After all, the Celestial King was the sky of this continent. Everything under the sky belonged to the Celestial King. Unless one wanted to die, no one would dare to offend the Celestial King. However, the white-robed exalted immortal had done it, and he had done it to his heart's content. He had tortured the Heavenly Wolf King and the Poison Masters to death. This made countless ambitious people feel extremely happy. The white-robed exalted immortal's words of, "I'm willing to fight for them," spread like wildfire across the entire continent. He received countless admirers and became a true friend of all women on the Divine Source continent. His feats had spread throughout the entire continent, including the Immortal King Palace. Boom! An inky black divine light erupted into the sky from the meteorite mystic area. The sun in the sky abruptly dimmed, and an extremely resentful voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. White-robed, exalted immortal, how dare you kill my trusted aides and subordinates? I'm going to kill you. Immediately afterward, the 10 top-rate exalted immortals of the Immortal King Palace set off toward the Leaping Wolf area to track down the white-robed exalted immortal. Immortal King Feng Wuya announced to the entire continent that he was going to challenge the white-robed exalted immortal to the immortal slaying platform in half a month. As long as the white-robed exalted immortal could come, Feng Wuya was willing to stake the entire Divine Source Empire, as the victor would rule over the entire Divine Source Empire. The Divine Source continent immediately became quite lively upon hearing this announcement. No, this was an unprecedented event that was going to rock the entire continent. The immortal slaying platform was located on the Heavenly Mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City. There was a natural heaven and earth formation there, which was imbued with a special law. The law was that the immortal slaying platform could only allow 2 living beings to enter, and only when one of them died could the other come out. The origins of the immortal slaying platform were already untraceable, but it was the best place for a fair duel. No outsiders could interfere. All of them knew that immortal King Feng Wuya was trying to lure the white-robed, exalted immortal out so that he could slay him with absolute power. However, there was no other way. After all, the immortal king wouldn't be able to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal anywhere else, as he was simply too fast. Hence, this was the only way. If the white-robed, exalted immortal was afraid of the immortal king palace's formation, then he could go to the immortal slaying platform to seek a fair duel. If he won, he would receive supreme power and status. The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. Would the white-robed, exalted immortal dare to accept this challenge? Just as the situation in the outside world was becoming more and more turbulent, the Springlight Palace was also becoming more and more turbulent. Over 2,000 concubines were staring blankly at the blank piece of paper. They knew that there was a line of words there. Do you want to leave this place? I'll take you with me. After I take care of business at the Leaping Wolf Mansion, I'll come to the Springlight Palace to take you with me. In the beginning, they were only skeptical about the authenticity of the letter, but now they were certain that this was a letter written to them by the white-robed, exalted immortal himself. The Leaping Wolf Mansion incident had been orchestrated by the white-robed, exalted immortal, and they had already learned of everything from the letter. So this was definitely the white-robed, exalted immortal's doing. Thus, the words, "I'll take you with me," began to surface in all of the concubines' hearts. Everyone knew what kind of person the white-robed, exalted immortal was. All of them had been forced to come to the Springlight Palace by the immortal king's forces, and they were willing to serve the immortal king. But how could that be possible? All of the concubines' minds were in turmoil, and some of them were even looking into the distance with lustful eyes, as if they were anticipating something. Immortal Queen, many of the concubines in the Springlight Palace are acting strangely. Are you really not going to investigate this? A servant in a blue dress asked in an urgent voice. An exquisitely beautiful woman in a white dress was playing a zither and singing an ethereal song. She didn't say anything and merely continued to sing. This was the leader of the Springlight Palace, Immortal Queen Yen Shuqin. She was a woman who made all of the concubines in the palace feel inferior. Unbeknownst to everyone, there was also a portrait of a man under her zither. Chapter 1370. Immortal King Feng Wuya had already issued his challenge. The entire continent was in turmoil. However, the white-robed, exalted immortal didn't publicly state whether or not he would accept the Immortal King's challenge. The 10 top-rate exalted immortals of the Immortal King Palace went to the Leaping Wolf Mansion to search for the white-robed, exalted immortal for 10 whole days, but they still couldn't find him. They couldn't even find where the 20,000 women had gone. Thus, one could imagine just how perfect the white-robed, exalted immortal was. Not only had he left after venting his anger, but he had also truly protected the rights of all of the women who had been persecuted. The world's perception of the white-robed, exalted immortal changed once again. At this moment, within a triangular building in the Springlight Palace, Lin was sipping tea in a leisurely manner. Yang Lingxian was pouring tea for Lin with a curious expression on her little face. Exalted immortal Lin, are you going to Immortal King Feng Wuya's challenge? Lin chuckled. What? Didn't you always think that fighting Feng Wuya was like throwing an egg against a rock? Why do you think I'm going to throw my life away now? Yang Lingxian pursed her lips awkwardly. I admit that I underestimated you. You do indeed have the power to battle an immortal king. Even though it looks like you can't defeat an immortal king, I have a kind of blind faith in you. Furthermore, you might not believe me, but you're already carrying the hopes of the entire continent on your shoulders. Stop. Stop. Lin extended a hand. I'm not some savior. What I'm going to do is just a very ordinary thing. Is poaching 2,000 of the Immortal King's concubines a very ordinary thing? Yang Lingxian asked. Lin was suddenly at a loss for words, and he could only clear his throat before changing the subject. Now that we have the public's opinion and the foundation of confidence, we can begin the 2,000-man mission. He can naturally kill the Immortal King first, then save all of the concubines. However, Doing so would make the concubines think that he was only saving them in passing, and that would make them less likable to him. Doing so would be nowhere near as touching as risking his life to save all of the concubines. 2 lines of text suddenly lit up on the blank letters in the hands of all of the concubines. I'm back. Do you want to come with me? I'll take you away from the Springlight Palace and take you to a paradise, and you can return true freedom to all of you. If you are willing, drop your blood essence onto the blank letters. That's right, and Lin had left a wisp of his divine intent on the letter. The hearts of the concubines who had been in the palace for a long time trembled once more. They looked at the words on the letter with fervent gazes, becoming somewhat excited. Should they choose to stay in the palace and become Feng and Feng Wuya? Feng Not and Lin Shun Feng and Tian Feng and said, King X, King Not and White, Not, the god of Not either, Not King Immortal, Not, one King Wang Not. During the battle at the Immortal King Palace, the white-robed, exalted immortal had already been ingrained into their minds, and the events at the Leaping Wolf Mansion had made him even more vivid and vivid. Which woman didn't fantasize that an unparalleled hero would come to save her from her current predicament atop a rainbow cloud? Now, this fairy tale-like scene was happening to them. Who wouldn't be tempted? Drop after drop of blood dripped onto the snowy white letters like dazzling plum blossoms. And Lin closed his eyes and sat down with his legs crossed to accept the information being transmitted to him. After a long while, he finally opened his eyes with a smile. It's done. 2,160 people have decided to escape from the Springlight Palace with me. Yang Lingqian rested her chin on her hand and looked at Lin with a vibrant smile on her face. You're wrong. 2,160 people have decided to escape from the Springlight Palace with you. And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he only came to his senses after looking at the alluring woman before him. He nodded awkwardly. You're right. Moments later, all of the women who had dripped their blood onto the letters saw a line of text. Gather at the Springlight Palace's White Jade Dance Hall at noon in 5 days, and I'll take all of you with me. All of the concubines saw a single keyword. All of you. In other words, aside from her, were there other concubines who were going to escape with a white-robed, exalted immortal? That made sense. After all, the white-robed, exalted immortal had said that he was going to save all of the women who had been persecuted. So how could she be the only one he was going to save? All of the concubines were even more convinced by the information in the letters, but they were also struck by an indescribable sense of loss. The unparalleled hero had indeed arrived atop a rainbow cloud, but he wasn't taking her with him. Instead, he was taking a bunch of women with him. Sure enough, there was always a difference between a fairy tale and reality. Not long after that, another piece of news swept through the entire continent. The white-robed exalted immortal had accepted Immortal King Feng Wuya's challenge to a one-on-one battle on the immortal slaying platform at noon in 5 days. This news created a massive stir across the entire continent. A massive wave of excitement was beginning to build. Countless people turned toward the heavenly mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City. One powerful being after another rose into the air and flew toward the legendary immortal slaying platform. None of them wanted to miss out on this epic battle. Within a large dance venue in Kunlun City, Ishi used the power of the veins of the earth in the Kunlun Empire to refine an immortal pill, which he swallowed before tearing open a spatial rift and disappearing on the spot. The 5-day deadline arrived very soon. On the heavenly mountain in the eastern part of Kunlun City, over 1 million powerful beings had gathered here. They were either riding atop powerful, ferocious beasts or flying atop all types of magic tools. As long as people raised their heads, they would be able to see streams of light shuttling back and forth in the sky without any signs of stopping. In the past, they would have never seen so many powerful beings in their entire lives. Now that all of the powerful beings of the continent had gathered here, what a grand occasion this was. The heavenly mountain was over 1 million feet tall and extended straight into the heavens. At the pinnacle of the heavens was a naturally formed arena known as the Immortal Slaying Platform. The immortal slaying platform had a radius of 5 kilometers and was enshrouded in a faint blue enchantment barrier that could keep the shock waves of the battle within at bay. If it weren't for this natural enchantment barrier, none of the powerful beings on the continent would dare to spectate the battle from up close. Immortal King Feng Wuya was already standing within the enchantment barrier. His black imperial robe flapped in the wind, and his eyes were filled with divine energy. He had clearly reached his peak condition and was waiting to crush his opponent with his most powerful attack. The white-robed, exalted immortal hadn't appeared yet, but everyone knew that he had already accepted the challenge, so he wasn't going to go back on his word. This was the pride of a super-powerful being. Over 1 million powerful beings were waiting for the white-robed, exalted immortal to appear. Right at this moment, the immortal king's voice transmission talisman suddenly lit up. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly, but he still picked up the voice transmission talisman. What is it? Yan Ji's urgent voice sounded from the other side. Immortal King, you've been cuckolded. Feng Wuya. Chapter 1371. Immortal King, you've been cuckolded. These words came from the voice transmission talisman. Feng Wuya didn't expect Yan Ji to say something like this, and he was completely dumbstruck. Since they didn't use any concealment spells, some of the spectating cultivators were able to hear their conversation. Those people were dumbfounded, and the air suddenly became silent. Do you know what you're saying? Feng Wuya felt like his head was about to explode. It's absolutely true. Master Immortal King, please calm down and let me explain. Yan Ji was clearly quite shocked as she continued. Today, my servants went to inspect the daily lives of all of the concubines, and they discovered that immortal concubine Shinran had disappeared. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly. He felt like there was still a chance for him to salvage the situation. Imperial concubine Xian Ran was a very playful and mischievous person, so she could have gone to another concubine's palace. My maid thought that Shinran had gone to another concubine's room, so she didn't pay much attention to it and continued to inspect the other concubines' lives. However, the maidservant then went to 16 chambers and found that there were only 5 concubines. She finally realized that something was wrong and immediately mobilized all the personnel to search. Feng Wuya's breathing accelerated. What was the result? Yan Ji replied. We searched the bedchambers of 3,520 concubines and the entire Springlight Palace, and discovered that 2,161 people are missing. Feng Wuya drew a sharp intake of breath, and his body trembled as he looked up into the sky, as if he were struggling to repress his emotions. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and asked, "Did you find anything?" We've discovered that almost all of the missing concubines' rooms contain news articles about the white-robed, exalted immortal. Furthermore, there was a blank white envelope in the rooms of a few concubines that seemed to have been left behind. I asked Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, who is most proficient in divine sense, to investigate the letter, and he discovered that there was a hint of a familiar power left behind in the letter. It was 99% identical to the white-robed, exalted immortal's power that night at the Immortal King Palace. In other words, it's very likely that the white-robed, exalted immortal was responsible for all of this. So, Lord Immortal King, it's very likely that you've been. Feng Wuya roared, "Shut up!" A loud roar shook 100 miles like the wrath of the heavens. The voice transmission talisman was instantly destroyed by Feng Wuya's roar. Over 1 million cultivators from the mainland were dumbfounded. Feng Wuya had already exploded with rage, and he roared into the sky, "Be *starred. I challenge you to a duel, but you secretly took away most of my concubines. I, Feng Wuya, will never forgive you." The pitch-black divine light soared into the sky and enveloped the world. The expressions of the cultivators changed drastically as they fled into the distance. The divine light was black, but the millions of spectating cultivators seemed to see a monstrous green light. "Run! Why are you still standing here? Are you tired of living?" But the battle between the immortal king and the white-robed, exalted immortal hasn't commenced yet, has it? Idiot! In such a situation, Would the two of them still fight properly here? The white-robed, exalted immortal had cuckolded the immortal king over 2,000 times, and the immortal king was definitely going to explode. Now that we know about this, do you think the immortal king would want us to bring this news out? You're saying, we might be killed by the immortal king. Yes. So run. One cultivator after another fled into the distance with no regard for their lives. None of them were idiots, and they knew that it was best to run now. Otherwise, they could become the target of the immortal king's wrath. Anyone who dares to spread this news must die. Feng Wuya's enraged roar erupted into the heavens. The black divine light transformed into the sharpest and most bloodthirsty arrows that rained down from the heavens, annihilating all living beings in their wake. One cultivator after another perished to the divine Tao arrows. Many of them were powerful beings from the immortal king palace who had come to cheer for them. This was an attack that didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and anyone who was unlucky would die. A fatso crushed a divine Tao arrow flying toward him before looking at the enraged man on the immortal slaying platform with astonishment and admiration in his eyes. The founding ancestor of the Tao of Alchemy really is the founding ancestor of the Tao of Alchemy. Both his thoughts and actions are beyond my imagination. I had thought that he would accept the challenge and fight the immortal king in a dignified manner, and I would be able to support him from the sidelines. But who would have thought that he would lure the immortal king away from the immortal slaying platform, after which he stole most of the immortal king's harem? Bad asterisk SS. Truly bad asterisk SS. This fatso was none other than Ishii. He was now in complete awe of Enlin, and was in awe of Enlin. On the immortal slaying platform, Feng Wuya's eyes were already crimson, and he was on the brink of chi deviation. Ishii was shocked. Attack the enemy's heart first. The Pil Dao Patriarch's heart attack technique really did break through the immortal king's defenses. Not bad at all. He didn't dare to stay any longer, and he began to flee into the distance. Immortal King Feng Wuya was enraged, and he unleashed his divine Dao arrows, killing tens of thousands of cultivators. However, over 900,000 powerful beings still managed to escape from the heavenly mountain. All of the cultivators who were lucky enough to survive began to spread the news with extreme hatred toward the immortal king. Thus, the entire divine source continent knew that the white-robed, exalted immortal had cuckolded the immortal king over 2,000 times. The immortal king had said that all those who dared to spread the news would die, but he couldn't just kill all of the living beings on this continent, right? News of this created another massive stir across the divine source continent. Everyone was shocked by the white-robed, exalted immortal's actions. Immortal King Feng Wuya's impotence had already caused quite a stir, and now, over half of his harem had been taken away by the white-robed, exalted immortal. Feng Wuya had already been known by everyone in the past, and now, he was even more so. However, things seemed to be going in a different direction. The people of the world suddenly discovered that the once paramount immortal king didn't seem to be so untouchable after all. He still had a lot of the same frustrations as mortals. For example, he would also become impotent, and he would also be cuckolded. Apparently, on that day, half of the heavenly mountain was sliced in half by the enraged immortal king Feng Wuya. The next day, news of this was released from Kunlun City. The white-robed, exalted immortal announced that he would take responsibility for this, and that he had only done this in the name of saving all of the women who had been oppressed. As for the battle, it would be another day. Spring Light Palace. Within the most luxurious palace, Feng Wuya sat on his throne with a thunderous expression. Yanji and immortal queen Yin Shuqin were kneeling on the ground, not daring to make a sound. Tell me, what do you think is going on? Feng Wuya rubbed his fingers together. What would be going on? Wasn't it just because she wasn't charismatic enough that the white-robed, exalted immortal was trying to steal her away? Yanji thought to herself. Immortal queen Yin Shuqin lowered her head. All of the 2,161 missing concubines seemed to have been forced into the Spring Light Palace by the immortal king's ambassadors. They didn't enter the palace voluntarily. Oh, you think they can just run away after being forced into the palace? That's a slap to my face? Feng Wuya chuckled. Pass down my orders. All of the escaped concubines will have their entire families executed. Yin Shuqin shuddered, and she bowed her head. Yes. Chapter 1372. Immortal King Feng Wuya was not a benevolent man to begin with. On the contrary, he was extremely violent and bloodthirsty, so he really was capable of executing the entire family of over 2,000 concubines. Immortal Queen Yin Shuqin could only nod in agreement, but she decided that she had to spread the news before she did this. That way, the family of the concubines would still have a chance to escape. After all, she was quite close to many of the concubines, and she couldn't bear to see the entire family of the concubines being executed. Report. Master, we have an urgent report. Two powerful Immortal King envoys hurried over before kneeling to the ground. Feng Wuya raised an eyebrow. What is it? The white-robed exalted immortal has announced in Kunlun City that he wants to challenge you to a battle on the immortal slaying platform in 2 days, and he says that if he doesn't come, then he won't. The Immortal King envoy stammered. Nothing? Feng Wuya's expression darkened. If he doesn't come, then he'll be a coward with no d***ck. The Immortal King envoy said with cold sweat pouring down his face. Bastard. Flames that could incinerate all things erupted from Feng Wuya's eyes as he roared with rage. The Immortal King envoy who had just spoken was instantly reduced to dust by Feng Wuya's roar. The other Immortal King envoy who hadn't said anything was trembling uncontrollably as he knelt to the ground. It was the white-robed, exalted immortal who had just said that. What had they done wrong? Immortal Queen Yin Shuqin lowered her head and didn't say anything. She knew that the white-robed, exalted immortal's challenge had hit the Immortal King where it hurt again. He wants to challenge me? What kind of trick is he trying to pull this time? Does he really think I'll fall for it? Huh. Feng Wuya was still roaring with rage as he vented his rage. Yin Shuqin's lips twitched. The Immortal King had already fallen for it. The white-robed, exalted immortal was trying to goad the Immortal King into accepting the challenge. He was trying to provoke the Immortal King into accepting the challenge, but he was trying to goad the Immortal King into accepting the challenge. As such, there was a very good chance that the Immortal King would accept the challenge. If he didn't accept this challenge, the humiliation he would have to endure would be even greater. All he could do now was take this opportunity to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal. Only then would he be able to wash away the humiliation he had suffered. No matter what the white-robed, exalted immortal had planned, he couldn't refuse this challenge, as this was the best opportunity to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal. Feng Wuya abruptly slapped the throne, and the spirit tool throne was instantly reduced to dust. Summon the 6 Kunlun divine generals. I'm going to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal in 2 days. Yin Shuqin's white dress fluttered like clouds and mist as she stood quietly at the side. As expected, Feng Wuya had decided to challenge the white-robed, exalted immortal to a duel. It looked like he would have to wait until after the duel. While the Celestial King was busy with the duel, they would first release the news and buy time for their loved ones to escape. If the Celestial King won, those people should have already escaped. If the Celestial King lost, then there was no point in escaping. The next day, news spread that Immortal King Feng Wuya had accepted the white-robed, exalted immortal's challenge. This matter created another huge stir on the Divine Source continent. Countless onlookers turned their attention to the heavenly mountain again. Are we still going to the duel between the white-robed, exalted immortal and Feng Wuya? It's probably for real this time, so we can't miss it. For safety's sake, let's watch from afar in case the Immortal King unleashes his wrath on us. I can't help but feel like the white-robed, exalted immortal is going to try something again. I'm so nervous. Even though it was very dangerous, there were still many fearless, powerful beings who set off toward the immortal slaying platform on the heavenly mountain. Perhaps it was because there were too many powerful beings last time, but there were also over 1 million powerful beings who had gathered here, and the massive summit of the heavenly mountain was still as lively as ever. What was surprising to all of the powerful beings was that the white-robed, exalted immortal was the first to arrive. On the circular immortal slaying platform, the 99 heavenly pillars with dragons engraved on them stood at the edge. The dark yellow ground was paved with a special material, and it appeared to be quite ancient, but it also gave off a sense of primal and desolate aura. A man in a flowing white robe stood at the center of the immortal slaying platform. His white robe fluttered even though there was no wind, and a pair of deep and clear eyes appeared on his handsome face. All of the powerful beings present were struck by a sense of awe and veneration at the sight of this man. There are many powerful beings who have dared to challenge the immortal king, but the white-robed exalted immortal is definitely the most dazzling and the most recognized one in the past 10,000 years. He's like a sun that can illuminate the entire world. Can he win? A beautiful female cultivator clenched her fists tightly as she looked at the man on the immortal slaying platform with concern on her face. He's also the most popular cultivator among women. A male cultivator added with an envious expression. Regardless of whether it was the female itinerant cultivators or the holy maidens and holy maidens from the major sects, all of them were staring at the man on the immortal slaying platform with rapt attention. Beauties had always loved heroes. This was a very apt saying even in the cultivation world. The divine source continent had always revered powerful beings, so it was very normal for those with lower cultivation bases to kneel to those with higher cultivation bases. Now, a powerful being comparable to the immortal king, Feng Wuya, had appeared out of nowhere. He was handsome and gentle, and he was willing to fight for the rights of all women. Who wouldn't like an exalted immortal like him? Now, the white-robed exalted immortal was the center of attention. Whether he would appear for a short while like the epiphyllum or be as eternal as the sun would depend on this battle. Many cultivators were looking forward to it, but at the same time, they were extremely nervous. In contrast, the main character of this battle, the white-robed exalted immortal, wasn't all that nervous. And Lin looked in the direction of the immortal king palace with a calm expression. Not long after, a man in a black robe arrived on a black lotus. Whether it was the wind and clouds in the sky or the flowers and trees on the ground, they all bowed to that man, as if he was the only supreme being in the world. The cultivators subconsciously lowered their heads when they saw the figure. This was the most powerful being on the entire continent. Immortal King Feng Wuya. Exalted Immortal and Lin, you've finally come to die. Feng Wuya's expression remained calm, and his previous rage was nowhere to be seen. He looked at Lin as if he were looking at a dead man, and he stepped into the enchantment barrier without any hesitation. Buzz on the immortal slaying platform, a blue barrier instantly enveloped the entire space. An invisible law began to spread. From this moment forth, the barrier would not open again unless one of them died. A cruel smile finally appeared on Immortal King Feng Wuya's face as he stared at Lin with a scorching light in his eyes. White-robed, exalted immortal. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this day? Don't worry, I won't kill you so easily. I'm going to make you suffer the most excruciating torture in this world before you die. And Lin stood proudly on the immortal, slaying platform with no hint of fear on his face. However, every single cell in his body was trembling from the excitement of being able to fight to his heart's content. Let's cut the crap and begin. And Lin spoke before charging toward Feng Wuya. The most intense battle in the history of the Divine Source Continent had finally erupted. Chapter 1373. And Lin was the first to charge forward, and he was like a white shadow flashing past. When he came to his senses again, the golden fist imbued with the power of the earth was already upon his face. Feng Wuya's expression remained unchanged as his right hand swept toward Lin's fist in a wraith-like manner. Bam! And Lin felt a vast, boundless power spread through his entire body through his arm. This was power in its purest form, but it was power of the Tao integration stage. His mountain quaking fist was pulverized, and his body flew through the air as if it had been struck by a gargantuan force. Feng Wuya tore through space and gave chase at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, Two of his fingers transformed into swords that glowed with inky black divine light before stabbing toward Lin's heart. In his current state, Lin was completely unable to evade, and he could only shield his chest with his hand. Feng Wuya's fingers were imbued with the power of the heaven and earth black lotus divine Tao. The lotus gave birth to all things, but the black lotus could annihilate all things. It instantly broke through Lin's divine body defenses before stabbing into Lin's palm. At the same time, Lin put two of his fingers together, upon which his 6 divine flames and 1 holy flame appeared. He unleashed his Yang-type cultivation method, fire fusion technique, to fuse all of the flames into a burst of flame energy before stabbing toward Feng Wuya's heart. The space around him seemed to be warping and melting in that instant. A disdainful sneer appeared on Feng Wuya's face, and he completely ignored Lin's attack. Bam! When Lin's fingers struck Feng Wuya's chest, a black lotus blossomed again to keep Lin's attack at bay. No matter how terrifying the flame energy imbued within Lin's fingers was, it was all kept at bay by the black lotus. This was Feng Wuya's heaven and earth black lotus, absolute defense. The black lotus was born from heaven and earth, and it was imbued with the will of heaven and earth. And Lin had just unleashed the origin energy of the netherworld and the 6 strikes of the war god, but Feng Wuya was still able to keep his attacks at bay. Another burst of excruciating pain erupted from his lower abdomen, and Lin's abdomen was kicked viciously by Feng Wuya, and his body flew back like a cannonball before crashing into the blue enchantment barrier. Many of the spectating cultivators let loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. Some female cultivators were so nervous that they tore the handkerchiefs in their hands. White-robed, exalted immortal, the second most powerful being on the divine source continent, Feng Wuya made his way toward Lin with a cold smile on his face. Reckless thing, since you know you're number 2, how dare you provoke me, the number 1? Do you really think that second place is only 1 step away from first place? What a joke. My realm is completely different from yours. To me, it doesn't matter if you're the 2nd, 3rd, or even the 100th. In my eyes, you're all ants. Feng Wuya abruptly stepped forward, and a boundless divine light shook the entire heavens. Even though the immortal slaying platform had already set up a barrier, the sky was still beginning to darken. On the immortal slaying platform, over 10,000 black lotuses bloomed, and one flower petal after another separated from the black lotuses to transform into blades of light, dancing about in the void. Every single one of the petals could kill off an ascendant immortal with unfathomable strength. There were countless deadly petals in the sky. Welcome to my battlefield, the Black Lotus Realm. Feng Wuya splayed his hands open, and his inky black eyes took on the shape of a lotus flower as his aura erupted forth, striking onlookers with a sense of asphyxiation and despair. Feng Wuya flicked a finger, and a black lotus flashed through the air, leaving an extremely ghastly wound on Lin's cheek. A smile appeared on his face. Do you see that? I'm invincible here, and I can kill an ascendant immortal with a single flower. Regardless of whether it's 10 or 100 return to void stage exalted immortals, I can kill them all with a flick of my finger. Are you ready to be tortured by me and become nutrients for the Black Lotus realm? Lin's expression remained unchanged, but his skin gradually took on a crimson golden color. Boundless divine flames enshrouded his body as he activated his fire god mode. His aura began to soar explosively, and it became more and more vast and oppressive. Hee, you're finally going to use your mystic technique? I'm going to crush your final hope. Feng Wuya was elated to see Lin's exploding aura. He knew that this was Lin's trump card, and he knew that this was Lin's trump card. Only by crushing Lin's most powerful trump card would he be able to enjoy torturing Lin to death. Lin activated his fire god mode and stretched his body slightly. This was the first time he had used this buff spell technique after progressing to the return to void stage. He could sense that the flame power within his body was highly integrated with his divine body, thereby allowing him to unleash extremely explosive power. At this moment, countless black lotus petals flew through the air, and Lin looked up at the petals, and he felt as if his consciousness were about to be sucked into them. Extreme engulfment power, slicing power, annihilation power. Feng Wuya was right when he said that each of his petals could kill a return to void stage exalted immortal. Bam bam bam. A series of violent collisions erupted. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed. He discovered that as the black lotus petals approached Lin's divine body, their power of the divine Tao was warped and weakened by the terrifying, scorching temperatures, and they were unable to pierce into Lin's body. Bam! In the next instant, Lin crashed through countless black lotus petals and arrived before Feng Wuya. The muscles on his arm bulged as boundless flame power converged upon his muscles, and he launched an almighty fist. Eightfold Fire God Fist. Boundless flames erupted from Lin's arm, and it was as if a sun were crashing down upon Feng Wuya. Not only did the flames illuminate the entire Black Lotus realm, but they also lit up the entire sky outside the enchantment barrier, making all of the cultivators feel as if they were looking at a sun that was even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. Feng Wuya's arm was enshrouded in the power of the divine Tao, and he also launched an almighty fist. In that instant, he realized that Lin's Kirin Fire God Fist didn't rely primarily on flame power. Instead, it was the extremely fearsome physical strength that was powered by flame power. Boom! Light and darkness clashed and tore at one another. This time, it was Feng Wuya's turn to experience the overwhelming power of Lin's fist. The power imbued within Lin's fist had far exceeded his imagination. Even though his body could conjure up lotus flowers to defend against Lin's attack, he couldn't keep all of the power at bay, and the sound of his bones cracking erupted. Boom! Another violent collision ensued. After the energy dissipated, all of the cultivators on the immortal slaying platform were greeted by the sight of Feng Wuya's disheveled body slumped against the enchantment barrier. Cough! Feng Wuya coughed up a mouthful of blood as he stared at Lin with confusion in his eyes. Waves of shock surged through the hearts of all of the cultivators upon seeing this. My God, the white-robed, exalted, immortal, injured Feng Wuya. I've lived for several thousand years, and this is the first time I've seen an immortal king injured. Powerful. He's way too powerful. Perhaps the white-robed, exalted immortal really can. Some of the cultivators were already getting excited, and some of the female cultivators were even on the verge of cheering. Only when a tall building was about to collapse would it know just how many people were looking forward to its downfall. Chapter 1374. Is this what it feels like to be injured? Feng Wuya moved his fractured right hand and wiped the blood from the corners of his lips as a smile appeared on his face. Ha! It's been a long time since I've felt something like this. If it weren't for you, I would have almost forgotten what physical pain feels like. A ferocious expression appeared on his face. Feng Wuya stepped forward and charged toward Lin at an even more terrifying speed. At the same time, his arm turned inky black, and his Lotus Tao true intent proliferated outward. Bam! Feng Wuya and Lin exchanged another punch. Lin could clearly sense that Feng Wuya was a lot more powerful than before. And then, Feng Wuya was blasted flying by Lin again. His body crashed heavily into the enchantment barrier, upon which another violent tremor ran through the air. Feng Wuya chortled with glee before charging toward Lin again and throwing another punch at Lin. Lin was not afraid of melee combat in his Fire God mode, and he immediately engaged in a fist-to-fist battle. A violent collision erupted, and shockwaves of energy crashed relentlessly into the enchantment barrier. Immortal King Feng Wuya was blasted flying again before crashing into the enchantment barrier. Immortal King, is this all you've got? Lin made his way toward Feng Wuya as divine flames enshrouded his body, making him appear as if he were a fire god descending upon this world. If you continue to be so impotent, you're going to be hammered to death by an ant in your eyes. Feng Wuya roared, as if Lin's words had struck a nerve. You're impotent. I'm going to kill you. Lin. Did I say he was impotent? Feng Weia made a peculiar hand seal, and a white lotus suddenly appeared before him before slowly rotating. And Lin could sense an extremely holy aura emanating from the white lotus. Feng Weia spat out a mouthful of blood essence toward the white lotus. Lotus of life and death, first stage, instant life. The white lotus was stained by the blood, and it quickly darkened to become a red lotus with a hint of black within it. A rich aura of death proliferated outward, as if it were trying to strip away all life force. Die! Feng Weia roared with a ferocious expression. The red lotus with a hint of black in it suddenly disappeared into thin air. And Lin suddenly had a very strange feeling. It was as if the lotus had not disappeared. It seemed to still exist somewhere. That's right, it existed in my heart. An incomparable sense of danger suddenly enveloped his body. He slowly lowered his head and found that his heart was slightly bulging. His indestructible divine body actually cracked. His heart suddenly felt very comfortable, and he wanted to die just like that. Like flowers blooming and wilting, the cycle of life and death, everything was so natural, and Lin's eyes were slightly blurred. A sinister smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face. Die. Just die, Bang. Fresh blood exploded like a bloody mist, and Lin's heart suddenly exploded, creating a huge hole. A bloodthirsty black lotus appeared where his heart was, replacing his heart and emitting an extremely demonic light. The sudden turn of events shocked all the onlookers. How could this be? White-robed, exalted immortal. One cultivator after another yelled for the white-robed man. A woman in a red dress flew toward the immortal, slaying platform with tears in her eyes as she yelled for Enlin's life. It hurts. Enlin was struck by a sense of excruciating pain, and he clasped his hand over his chest in agony. Boundless agony assaulted his nerves in a frenzy, and he almost fainted. Ha! White-robed, exalted immortal. This is the lotus of life and death that I unleashed after expending over 100 years of cultivation base. As long as I'm in the Black Lotus realm, I can make the lotus of life and death bloom anywhere, including your heart. A joyful smile finally appeared on Feng Wuya's face at the sight of Enlin's exploding heart. Be a good little boy and become my Black Lotus nourishment. Even a god won't be able to save you now. Enlin knew that Feng Wuya was right. The Black Lotus that had replaced his heart was not only engulfing his life force in a frenzy, but it also possessed an extremely powerful sealing effect that made it impossible for him to unleash any power. In his current state, he could only wait for death. He had been too careless. As expected, no Dao integration stage super mighty figure was weak. All Dao integration stage super mighty figures possessed unfathomable power. For example, Feng Wuya could suddenly unleash a mystic technique that could put Enlin in a perilous situation. Enlin didn't want to unleash his trump card so quickly. He wanted to gauge Feng Wuya's abilities first before using Feng Wuya as a test subject. However, who would have thought that Feng Wuya would suddenly unleash his trump card and blow up his heart? What do I do? What do I do? Enlin extended a trembling hand in an attempt to remove the Black Lotus from his heart. However, the Black Lotus had taken over his heart, and in his weakened state, he didn't even have the power to move the Black Lotus. Was he really going to die here? Enlin's expression was filled with indignation, but he was unable to stop his life force from flowing away, and his features were becoming wrinkled and withered at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Death never took pity on any living being. Only when it truly descended did Enlin realize just how powerless and despairing he was. Right at this moment, a black streak of light suddenly leaped out from behind him. It then stabbed toward Enlin's heart at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh! An extremely sharp blade pierced through the blossoming Black Lotus and pulverized it. What? Feng Wuya's expression shifted drastically. Enlin also stared down at his own chest with incredulity, where an inky black longsword was embedded. Little Xia, A smile appeared on his face as he slowly heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. A chubby little girl suddenly appeared, and she pulled out her evil slaying sword before turning to Feng Wuya with a cold expression on her face. You almost killed yourself while fighting a rookie Dao integration stage super mighty figure. How embarrassing. A resigned smile appeared on Lin's face as he pulled out 3 immortal pills from his storage ring before swallowing them all. His heart had almost exploded. Thankfully, he had already reached the 3rd stage of his evergreen technique, thereby granting him the ability to extend his life for a short period of time. Otherwise, that attack just then would have killed him. Lin meditated off to the side as he activated his evergreen technique in a frenzy, digesting the powerful medicinal effects of the 3 immortal pills and quickly healing his injuries. Who are you? Feng Wuya's expression shifted drastically as he stared at little Xie with astonishment. You're just a country bumpkin who's never even seen a sword spirit. Little Xie wore a disdainful expression. Sword spirit? What's that? Swords have spirits and can materialize? Feng Wuya was astonished. He had seen tools that could speak, but he had never seen a tool that could materialize into a life form. That's right. I'll have to explain this from the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. Little Xie explained to Feng Wuya upon seeing the confusion on his face. And Lin thought to himself, well done. Stalling for time was exactly what he wanted. He immediately took this opportunity to heal his injuries, and his blood became more and more abundant as the embryonic form of a heart began to appear. Immortal King Feng Wuya was no idiot, and he immediately flared up with rage at the sight of Lin healing his injuries. He ignored little Xie's explanation and pounced toward Lin. If you want to bully him, you'll have to get past me first. Little Xie positioned herself in front of Lin with her evil slaying sword before slashing toward Feng Wuya. Chapter 1375. Little Xie was already at the return to void pinnacle stage, and after progressing to a divine tool and attaining a divine tool domain, her power was further enhanced after Lin progressed to the return to void stage. As such, her power had completely transcended beyond the return to void pinnacle stage. Get lost. Feng Wuya remained completely unfazed in the face of little Xie's power, and he tried to crush little Xie's sword projection with his bare hands, only to be knocked back several hundred meters by her sword technique. Outside the immortal slaying platform, all of the spectating cultivators were already at a complete loss for words. They had thought that the white-robed exalted immortal was going to be defeated, but who would have thought that an unfathomably powerful woman in a black dress would emerge from his sword and turn the tables at this critical moment? Who the hell was this little girl? Can only 2 people enter the immortal slaying platform? How did that female immortal come in? I heard the little girl say that she's a sword spirit. Sword spirit? The sword spirit could take on a physical form? What's going on? The white-robed, exalted immortal possesses an unfathomable cultivation base. His sword is not something that we can fathom. Just as the experts and cultivators outside the arena were having a heated discussion, Immortal King Feng Wuya materialized a holy white lotus in the air again. Little Xie's eyes narrowed slightly. She knew that Immortal King Feng Wuya was going to unleash the same lotus of life and death that he had used to kill Lin. She immediately flipped her sword through the air, and her divine tool, domain, instantly engulfed the immortal slaying platform and encompassed Feng Wuya's Black Lotus realm. In that instant, Feng Wuya lost his sense of heaven and earth and space. Even the immortal slaying platform beneath his feet had been transformed into a void of darkness. His expression changed. Is this an illusion, or vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilate? Little Xie wielded her evil slaying sword, and the blade of her sword disappeared into her divine tool domain. However, it was as if she were swinging a sword through the air. A sense of foreboding welled up in Feng Wuya's heart, and he was just about to take evasive measures when the white lotus in front of him began to vanish. A black lotus instantly blossomed on his chest. This was because the heavens and earth had determined that this move could threaten his life. Then, something even more shocking happened. The black lotus in front of him began to crack, as if it had received a fatal blow. Ka-cha-bang! The black lotus shattered, and a beautiful flower of blood erupted from Feng Wuya's chest. He looked at the blossoming blood on his chest in disbelief. It was like the deepest nightmare, and he couldn't believe that he was the one who had suffered this injury. Little Xie's features were slightly pale. It was quite clear that she had overexerted herself in order to injure Feng Wuya, but she still managed to maintain her domain. As expected of a Tao integration stage mighty figure, Feng Wuya's black lotus divine Tao light enshrouded his entire body, and his shattered chest was healing at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Lotuses were related to the power of life and death, and as a Tao integration stage super mighty figure, he possessed extremely freakish regenerative abilities, so even if his heart was blasted apart, he would still be fine. The second stage of the lotus of life and death, lotus body nurturing. A black lotus suddenly appeared above Feng Wuya's head. The black lotus revolved relentlessly as black liquid flowed down from it, causing his entire body to become inky black and hard. You can't be thinking that I can't see you just because your skin has darkened, right? Little Xie chuckled lightly. Feng Wuya's inky black skin did indeed appear to have disappeared within her domain, but this was little Xie's domain. She could sense every single particle within this domain. So how could she lose sight of Feng Wuya? It was not an exaggeration to say that she had everything under control. However, she also knew that Feng Wuya's spell techniques weren't that simple. She immediately unleashed another annihilation sword strike toward the man. However, at this moment, Feng Wuya had already sprang into action. He was like a bolt of lightning, and he instantly appeared before little Xie before gripping the air in his hand to lock onto a certain spot in space. A sinister smile appeared on his face, revealing his pristine white teeth in the darkness. I am now the Heaven and Earth Lotus, and I can communicate with Heaven and Earth. I can finally sense your sword. Feng Wuya's hand was gripping onto something tightly as he launched a fist toward little Xie's body. Bam! Terrifying power surged for 5 kilometers, tearing at the space within the domain in a frenzy. Little Xie's body was bent into a crooked position by the immense power, and she crashed toward the enchantment barrier. Feng Wuya chortled with glee as a vicious expression appeared on his face, and he pounced toward little Xie again. Little Xie had expended too much energy, and she had been severely wounded as well, so her aura was already quite unstable. She was unable to continue using her Vanquish the Heavens and Slay all evil technique, so she could only unleash an evil sword technique toward Feng Wuya's chest. To her surprise, the divine tool projection struck Feng Wuya's chest, but it was as if it had struck another divine tool. An extremely sharp screeching sound erupted as sparks flew, but it was unable to cut into Feng Wuya's chest. My entire body has transformed into the absolute defense of the Heaven and Earth Black Lotus. So how are you going to cut through it? A cruel smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face as he launched another vicious punch toward little Xie. A resounding boom erupted. Little Xie was blasted back to the edge of the enchantment barrier again. This time, she was unable to even maintain her divine tool domain, and the darkness receded. There were only over 10,000 black lotuses left on the ground, all of which were exuding a sinister light. You see that? No matter how many pieces of trash there are, they're just stalling for time. In any case, I'm going to be the only one walking out of the immortal slaying platform in the end. Feng Wuya cracked his neck from side to side. He made his way toward little Xie as he contemplated how he was going to torture her. Right at this moment, the voice transmission talisman that he had just received lit up. Feng Wuya's brows furrowed slightly. In a battle like this, he shouldn't be wasting time answering voice transmissions. However, this was a voice transmission from Luo Yin, the leader of the Immortal King's envoys. For him to still dare to send a voice transmission at a time like this, it had to be something extremely important. Feng Wuya answered the voice transmission. What is it? Lord Immortal King, something bad has happened. Luo Yan's anxious and flustered voice came over, and there was also the sound of explosions. What happened? Feng Wuya's expression shifted again as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. A top-tier, powerful being has forced his way into the fallen star mystic realm, and we can't stop him. Luo Yin yelled. That top-tier, powerful being is even more powerful than Grand Elder Fu Haozong. His target is most likely that meteorite. Feng Wuya's mind exploded with a resounding boom. During the last battle, he had come here, and the white-robed, exalted immortal had snuck into his harem to steal over 2,000 of his concubines. This time, he had learned his lesson and only agreed to the white-robed, exalted immortal's appearance on the immortal slaying platform. The two of them entered the immortal slaying platform, and the battle would only conclude when one of them died. He had thought that this would be a surefire success. However, he didn't think that the white-robed, exalted immortal slaying platform would have an accomplice, and his target was his most precious meteorite. Boom! A destructive divine light erupted from his body. Feng Wuya was unable to control himself again, and his rage threatened to collapse the entire sky. White-robed, exalted immortal, you piece of sh*t. I'm fighting you, but you're sending someone to invade my home. Chapter 1376. Immortal King Palace. The sound of the explosion resounded throughout the world. Ha ha! Get out of my way! The fatso was invincible, and all of the powerful beings from the Immortal King Palace who stood in his way were reduced to dust. Like a bulldozer, he bulldozed his way to the secret realm of the fallen star. Luo Yin, who was riddled with wounds, roared and charged at Fatty again. Heaven-burning, bone-melting claw. His hand transformed into a claw, from which crimson flames imbued with the power of the divine Tao transformed into a dragon claw that was powerful enough to incinerate space itself before crashing down upon the fatso's body. The Tao of alchemy is soft and soft, Fatty shouted loudly, his face not showing the slightest hint of fear. He used his bulging belly to collide with Luo Yan's heaven-burning bone claw. Bang! The heaven-burning, bone-melting claw smacked Fatty's stomach, causing it to cave in. Before Luo Yin could even rejoice, an extremely terrifying rebounding force came from the sunken area and surged throughout his entire body. Part of the heaven-burning bone-melting claw's power actually changed direction. Luo Yin let out a blood-curdling screech as he was struck by the rebounding flame energy. He coughed up a mouthful of blood as he crashed into the meteorite's secret land. The Fatty snorted. You dare to block Grandpa Shi's path? The intruder was none other than the disciple of the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, Yishi the Enlightened. He and Enlin split up. Enlin was responsible for holding off Feng Wuya, while Yishi was responsible for stealing the heavenly Tao fragment. To his surprise, not only did Immortal King Feng Wuya attend Enlin's battle, even the 6 Kunlun divine generals had gone to the heavenly mountain. This was a brilliant opportunity, so how could Yishi miss it? That black, square-shaped building up ahead should be where the fragment of the heavenly Tao is stored. To think that it's isolated by a Tao integration stage, spell formation. Yishi harumphed lightly as he brought out a strange wooden plaque from his storage ring. There were divine symbols carved onto the wooden plaque. Fortunately, Master was prepared and gave me this. He was about to throw out the divine talisman. Stop! Third elder son Bu let out a clear shout. Her body moved along with her sword, and her posture was like an ice flower. She swung her sword, and an endless cold power spread out, freezing the void within a radius of tens of miles. Yishi was struck by a sense of extreme frost power. At this moment, tens of thousands of mountains appeared behind Grand Elder Fu Haozong, and boundless crushing power crashed down upon Yishi. This was a power that could instantly pulverize a return to void stage, exalted immortal into mincemeat. Second Elder Wang Chun transformed into a black shadow and quickly approached Yishi with a dagger in his hand. Like a venomous viper, he took advantage of the fact that Yishi was being suppressed by the 2 elders to deliver a lethal strike. The cooperation between the 3 elders could be said to be extremely perfect. If the average peak level ascendant immortal were to witness this, they would surely be scared witless. However, Ishi was completely unfazed. He slapped his own stomach and yelled, "7 happiness pill, explode the heavens." With that, his stomach suddenly erupted with a dazzling light. From afar, it looked like a giant pill that had just come out of the furnace. Extremely dense pill energy transformed into a substantial force that continuously attacked Gongsun Bu and Fu Haotsong suppression. Wang Chun was also struck by the power of the pill, and his body abruptly faltered. Ishi opened his mouth and abruptly blasted 7 shimmering golden energy pills toward the powerful beings around him. These pills were imbued with the power of pills that he had refined for who knew how long. Ishi had attained Tao through pill refinement and pill consumption. Not only could the pills he consumed make him more powerful, but they could also be refined by his body and spat out again. This was his divine Tao. The golden pills pierced through everything and flew toward the 3 elders. 7 happiness pill, explode the heavens, explode. Ishi roared, and it was as if 7 suns had suddenly risen within the immortal king palace. Boom, 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 boom. In an instant, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. Heaven and earth changed color as boundless golden energy swept forth and destroyed the entire immortal king palace. This was the power of an exploding pill. Even looking at it from several hundred kilometers away, it was so dazzling and terrifying that it struck fear into the hearts of onlookers. It was as if the entire heaven and earth were about to be flipped upside down. After the explosion subsided, Fu Haotsong and Sun Bu were already half kneeling on the ground with blood all over their bodies, and some parts of their bodies had been charred black. Second Elder Wang Chun was in the most miserable state. He had been struck by 3 happiness pills in a row, and he was lying on the ground in a half-dead state, having completely lost the ability to fight. TSK, TSK, I told you not to stop me, but you just wouldn't listen. You have to realize that I'm the Lord Shi who defeated 9 mighty figures at the return to Void Pinnacle stage under Nuwa's command. Ishi didn't even look at them as he strode toward the meteorite mystic area. What do we do? He's too powerful, and we can't stop him. Sun Bu wiped the blood from the corners of her lips with a panicked expression. It'll be fine. Grand Elder Fu Haotsong, on the other hand, was extremely calm. The meteorite mystic grounds grand array is the strongest grand array in the entire continent, meticulously laid out by us immortal kings. Even if the 6 god generals of Kunlun were to fight here for an entire day and night, they still wouldn't be able to break it. That fatty wants to break it in a short period of time? All we have to do is wait for the immortal king to kill the white-robed, exalted immortal, and he'll lose. Ishi ignored the Grand Elder's words and made his way toward the formation. Formation crushing talisman, go. He tossed the wooden plaque with the divine talisman inscribed on it toward the Tao integration stage formation. An extremely terrifying power instantly erupted from the defensive formation upon contact with the wooden plaque in an attempt to shatter it. However, the divine talisman inscribed on the wooden plaque lit up in that instant. At the same time, a vast and boundless power erupted from it. It was born from chaos and could destroy all things in this world. Bam! There was an extremely crisp explosion. A massive hole was blasted into the formation around the meteorite mystic area by the wooden plaque. Just like that, Ishi swaggered into the hole. The Grand Elder's mouth gaped open. The second Elder, who was on the brink of death, almost couldn't breathe. The third Elder's eyes widened. This is the number 1 formation under the heavens that you were talking about. Fu Haotsong. Ishi made his way toward the square building and pushed open the gate. He was greeted by the sight of a gargantuan lotus flower. The lotus flower was constructed from white spirit jade, and it appeared to be extremely beautiful. However, there was nothing on the lotus flower. That's strange. Where is the heavenly Tao fragment? Ishi released his divine sense, but he couldn't find any other clues. Meanwhile, on the heavenly mountain over 1,000,000 feet tall, over 1,000,000 cultivators were once again shocked by Lin's antics. They had thought that the white-robed, exalted immortal didn't have any tricks up his sleeves, but it turned out that he still had one up his sleeve. From the looks of it, immortal King Feng Wuya's expression, it appeared that the other person working with the white-robed, exalted immortal was extremely powerful. This made them very curious about the identity of this mysterious, powerful being. On the immortal slaying platform, Feng Wuya had been enraged to the point of insanity, and he pounced toward little Xie as if he were going to tear her apart. Die! Feng Wuya's inky black hands abruptly gripped little Xie's arms. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of little Xie at an extremely fast speed before grabbing on a Feng Wuya's hands in a death grip. White-robed, exalted immortal, Feng Wuya gritted his teeth. And Lin wore a flowing white robe, and a massive, gaping hole in his chest had already been replaced by his fair skin. Divine flames surged around his body, and he had clearly activated his fire god mode. However, aside from his fire god mode, there were also clear differences. A series of dazzling star veins had appeared all over his body, and black infernal energy revolved around his body. An aura that was several times more terrifying than before began to proliferate through the air. Countless stars flashed through in Lin's eyes. It's over. I'm going to beat you like a dog now. Chapter 1377. Feng Wuya cracked open his mouth as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Little Xie immediately took this opportunity to merge back into her evil slaying sword before returning to Enlin's back. Feng Wuya didn't seem to mind as a cold, dangerous light flashed through his eyes. White-robed, exalted immortal, I won't mind killing you again. A cruel smile appeared on his face as he glared at Enlin. He abruptly raised a leg as he spoke before unleashing a vicious kick toward Enlin's waist. Under the effects of the lotus of life and death, Feng Wuya's defenses, speed, and power were all at the very pinnacle, and he was virtually invincible. His kick was so fast that no cultivator could follow it with their eyes. Enlin took the attack head-on without taking any evasive measures. Boom! The explosive power caused the entire immortal slaying platform to tremor violently. Feng Wuya felt as if he could hear the bones in his lower legs shattering. A purple starry meridian appeared on Enlin's waist, which automatically blocked Feng Wuya's kick. At the same time, the power of the star annihilation surged toward Enlin's lower leg. Feng Wuya let loose a wail of anguish, and he tried to retreat in shock, only to discover that his hands had already been immobilized by Enlin, and he was unable to struggle free. I'll give you a kick as well. Enlin spoke in a cold voice as the power of the stars gathered beneath his feet. At the same time, a sea of purple starlight appeared beneath his feet, as if it were imbued with a boundless starry sky. Feng Wuya's heart jolted as a boundless sense of impending death surged toward him. Enlin had already sprang into action. He was as fast as a shooting star, yet also as ethereal as smoke. Feng Wuya was completely unable to track Enlin's true trajectory, and before he could even react, his lower abdomen had already been struck by Enlin's kick. His skin, which was imbued with the essence of the black lotus of heaven and earth, caved in from the force of the kick, and a terrifying power passed through his body, pulverizing his internal organs. Crackle, kacha, the sound of ribs cracking erupted at the same time. PFFF. Feng Wuya threw up a mouthful of blood, and his body flew back for over 10 kilometers. Enlin crouched down and unleashed his Kuin Peng travel technique, covering the distance of over 10 kilometers in the blink of an eye. He arrived behind Feng Wuya before launching a fist into Feng Wuya's back. Feng Wuya tried to twist his body in midair to evade Enlin's fist. At this moment, Enlin activated his divine inspection technique, and his fist followed Feng Wuya's trajectory before striking Feng Wuya's back. Feng Wuya's body, which had been flying through the air, was instantly hammered outward amid the sound of his spine shattering. PFFF. Feng Wuya threw up another mouthful of blood. His body was propelled forward by a huge force. In the blink of an eye, Enlin rushed in front of him and kicked him into the sky. In the next instant, Enlin flew above him and struck his heart with his palm, sending him crashing to the ground. Then, Enlin appeared behind him. Immortal King Feng Wuya had finally experienced true despair. He had thought that after attaining the second stage of the Lotus of Life and Death, he would be invincible in terms of speed, power, and defense. However, he didn't think that even retaliating would be a problem. He could only be pummeled relentlessly and throw up blood, as he was completely defeated by the white-robed, exalted immortal. And Lin could just barely match Feng Wuya in his Fire God mode. However, after using his Fire God mode, Emperor Ziwei's core, buff mystic technique, star vein divine technique, and his intermediate rank, war, god, buff technique, origin energy of the netherworld, and Lin was completely superior to Feng Wuya. He had combined 3 buff mystic techniques and unleashed them at the same time. Not only would this drastically deplete his energy, but it would also inflict severe damage to his body as well. However, in exchange for this, he would receive unprecedented power. This was the power to beat Feng Wuya like a dog. And Lin couldn't allow the same tragedy to repeat itself, so he unleashed his full power from the get-go. 3 ultimate bombs on the immortal slaying platform, and Lin's body tore through space and transformed into a series of afterimages. Violent clashes erupted throughout heaven and earth, and the terrifying shockwaves caused the immortal slaying platform's formation to tremor over 100 times per second. In other words, Feng Wuya was being pummeled over 100 times per second. All of the cultivators outside the immortal slaying platform were dumbstruck. It was as if they were watching a miracle, watching this unprecedented duel. The most powerful being on the Divine Source continent, Feng Wuya, was being pummeled relentlessly. They couldn't even see the two of them, as the battle was simply too fast. However, they could clearly hear Feng Wuya's blood-curdling cries. I thought the immortal king had already won, but why is the white-robed, exalted immortal so terrifying? Is he still the same white-robed, exalted immortal? Could it be that the white-robed, exalted immortal has also taken that step and reached the same cultivation base as the immortal king? Otherwise, this doesn't make any sense. I refuse to believe that a return to Void Stage, exalted immortal could be this powerful. Outside the heavenly mountain, the 6 Kunlun divine generals were initially very confident in the immortal king, but they were all completely dumbstruck as they stared blankly at the white-robed, exalted immortal pummeling the immortal king. Yang Lingqian's eyes were filled with excitement and infatuation as she stared at the rapidly moving figure on the immortal slaying platform. Even though she couldn't see it clearly, it was still quite mesmerizing. Blood splattered all over the immortal slaying platform. All of that was immortal King Feng Wuya's blood. Bam! An earth-shattering boom erupted. Immortal King Feng Wuya's head was pummeled viciously by Lin, and his eyes widened as his head almost exploded. Boom! The immortal slaying platform tremored violently. Feng Wuya's body crashed heavily into the immortal slaying platform, and the immortal slaying platform, which had never been damaged in the slightest, was now showing just how terrifying that attack was. To think that you're still alive after being pummeled over 10,000 times. Not taking into account anything else, your life force is pretty strong. And Lin stood in midair before pulling out his evil-slaying sword. If he couldn't be killed, then he would just have to kill him. Wind sword. And Lin's sword fell at an extremely fast speed, aiming directly for Feng Wuya's neck. Feng Wuya's entire body had been pulverized, and he was on the brink of death. He was completely unable to move or evade Lin's sword strike. And Lin's sword strike had been unleashed after activating his triple buff technique, and it was as if his sword were descending from the heavens with unstoppable might. A black lotus appeared on Feng Wuya's neck. Heaven and earth had determined that Lin's sword strike was very lethal. The sword blade came into contact with the black lotus, and an earth-engulfing sword might erupted forth. A sharp screeching sound erupted as the might of a divine tool was completely unleashed. Boundless sharpness pierced through Feng Wuya's body, tearing a deep fissure into the ground below. Crack! The black lotus shattered. Feng Wuya's eyes widened with incredulity on his face. The evil-slaying sword had already sliced through the black lotus, and in the next instant, it was already upon his neck. However, at the same time, the blade of the sword was only 0.001 centimeters away from his neck when it suddenly stopped. It was as if there was a thin barrier that kept the attack at bay. And Lin's pupils contracted slightly as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. He knew that the evil-slaying sword was unable to slice through Feng Wuya's neck, not because of his defenses. Instead, it was because of an extremely special power. And this power, he felt a sense of déjà vu. Chapter 1378. Just as Enlin was feeling perplexed, Feng Wuya took advantage of this opportunity to launch a counterattack, and he slashed his hand toward Enlin's body. Enlin was able to keep up with Feng Wuya's speed after activating his triple buff technique, and he slashed his evil-slaying sword toward Feng Wuya's neck with one hand while grabbing toward Feng Wuya's hand with the other. Rip! A burst of excruciating pain instantly swept through his entire body. Enlin discovered that his divine body had been easily torn apart by Feng Wuya's hand, leaving a ghastly gash on his arm. This power! Enlin's expression shifted again. Ha ha! Die! At this moment, Feng Wuya unleashed another attack, and he slashed a semi-transparent saber projection through the air. Enlin immediately drew his sword to defend himself, but the terrifying power behind the saber projection sent him flying for several kilometers. Some of the saber projections even pierced through his evil-slaying sword and tore a massive gash in his chest, extending all the way from his shoulder to his waist, and blood splattered onto the ground. Feng Wuya slowly rose to his feet, and a peculiar white light flashed through his eyes as a hint of a smile appeared on his face. It's very hard to understand, isn't it? Enlin's brows furrowed slightly. This power was indeed very hard to understand, but it wasn't as if he hadn't seen it before. I didn't want to use this power here. After all, if I use it recklessly, even my cultivation base will be affected. Feng Wuya looked at Enlin with an indifferent expression as he said, "So what if your other companion has entered the meteorite mystic area? Didn't you see that the 6 Kunlun divine generals have remained outside the immortal slaying platform this entire time?" Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this before his expression darkened. "That meteorite is in your hands?" "Ha ha! That's right." A victorious smile appeared on Feng Wuya's face. "The meteorite is in my hands, but it can't be called a meteorite. It's a gift from the heavens." Feng Wuya opened his hand. A white crystal-like object that was constantly changing appeared in the center of his palm. The entire world fell silent as soon as it appeared, as if it were the only thing left in this world. It had no fixed shape. Sometimes it was hexagonal, sometimes it was triangular, and sometimes it was circular. It didn't seem to have any substance. Sometimes it condensed into a crystal, and sometimes it became illusory and disappeared like smoke. It was impossible to detect. Outside the immortal slaying platform, over 1 million cultivators were also seeing this thing for the first time. Looks of infatuation and desire appeared on their faces. What a beautiful crystal. Is this the core of the meteorite from 10,000 years ago? I can finally see the mysterious meteorite. I really want to have it. The cultivators discussed animatedly. The fragment of the heavenly Tao seemed to possess some sort of fatal attraction that caused their gazes to be unable to move away from it, and they were slightly unable to free themselves from it. Doesn't it look wonderful? Not only did it allow me to comprehend a new realm, but it also allowed me to obtain power that you cannot imagine. I call it the Heart of Heaven. Feng Wuya stared at the object in his hand with an intoxicated expression. As long as I have this, I am the heavens. I am invincible. And Lin couldn't help but laugh. Heart of Heaven, you really know how to name things. However, I've killed many people like you who think they're invincible. Impudent. Feng Wuya let loose an enraged roar, and the heavenly Tao fragment fused into his body again before launching an almighty fist toward Enlin. The fist projection fused with heaven and earth, and it was imbued with a burst of boundless divine might. Enlin slashed his sword toward the fist projection, but his sword projection was instantly shattered by the fist projection. Ha ha! As long as I inject my will into my attacks, the heart of heaven will be able to manifest my will into reality. You won't be able to stop it. Feng Wuya chortled with glee as he glowered at Enlin with a ferocious expression. Enlin raised his sword in front of him, and the fist landed on the evil-slaying sword. However, the fist passed through the evil-slaying sword and struck Enlin's chest, causing it to cave in. PFFF. Enlin couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood, and his body swayed slightly, but he still just barely managed to steady himself. Your body wasn't punctured? Feng Wuya was a little surprised. He had originally thought that his fist could break through anything, and that he could even punch a large hole in his opponent's body in one breath. Enlin panted heavily as he looked at Feng Wuya, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. What are you smiling about? Feng Wuya's expression darkened. A barrier that can defend against all powers, an absolute power that can pierce through all things. It's like the laws of heaven and earth, the laws of heaven and earth, and everything must operate according to its predetermined trajectory. The heavenly Tao fragment has granted you the power of the laws of the heavenly Tao. And Lin nodded. No wonder you say you're invincible. Compared to the vast majority of mighty figures, you are indeed invincible. But do you know what? Your power is borrowed. And Lin splayed open his palm, upon which rainbow-like lightning danced joyfully, as if it were singing a song of life, and there seemed to be an unfathomable might imbued within it. And my power is the foundation. What the hell are you talking about? Feng Wuya's expression darkened even further. He felt like Enlin's words were a little out of his league. Enlin didn't say anything. Instead, he thrust his palm toward Feng Wuya. The rainbow bolt of lightning tore through space before hurtling toward Feng Wuya's chest with dazzling divine might. Feng Wuya didn't take evasive measures upon seeing this. Instead, he looked at Enlin with a cold expression. Foolish ant, do you still not understand? I've activated the power of the heart of the heavens, and no one can harm me now. Boom! Lightning roared like divine lightning. The lightning bolt instantly pierced through Feng Wuya's chest and punctured his heart. A massive hole had appeared in his chest, and the area around it was charred black with wisps of white smoke rising from it, as if it was a manifestation of the terrifying power it had just unleashed. Air? Feng Wuya's mouth gaped open as he stared blankly at his own chest with astonishment and befuddlement on his face. Didn't he say that no one could harm him? How had it been punctured? WHY? Feng Wuya stared at Enlin as his body swayed unsteadily. Enlin spoke in a cold voice. You're only using the residual power of laws of the fragment of the heavenly Tao, and you're merely borrowing it. However, I possess the power of the heavenly Tao. Crackle, boom. Countless bolts of golden void lightning erupted from Enlin's body before revolving around his body to form a golden void lightning robe. Enlin's eyes flashed with lightning, and the paramount might of lightning fell from the heavens before crashing down upon his body. The boundless might emanating from his body made all of the onlookers feel as if they didn't even dare to breathe heavily. A bolt of golden void lightning fell from the sky, shattering space and puncturing even the enchantment barrier around the immortal slaying platform before transforming into a golden lightning sword that was as dazzling as the sun. There was only one color left between heaven and earth, and that was boundless golden void light. All of the cultivators, including Feng Wuya, were struck by the same thought. The man in the lightning robe wielding the golden void lightning sword. He didn't belong to the mortal world. He was a god from above the heavens. Chapter 1379. Feng Wuya was stunned by Enlin's appearance. His godlike appearance was deeply engraved into his mind. Even the immortal slaying platform, which was imbued with the power of laws, had been shattered by a bolt of lightning. How could he not be scared? Who are you? Feng Wuya's body trembled uncontrollably, but he still forced himself to speak. Who am I? Enlin blinked before pointing his golden void lightning sword at Feng Wuya. So be it. I'll let you know what I'm talking about. Listen up. I am the heavenly lightning god who controls lightning between heaven and earth, and Lin. The heavenly lightning god? Feng Wuya murmured. Crackle. Lightning flashed, and Lin's body instantly disappeared, and in the next instant, he appeared right before Feng Wuya, before slashing his sword down. Heavenly Heart Explosive Fist. Feng Wuya roared as he launched both fists at once. The power of the heavenly Tao fragment imbued his fists with the destructive will of the heavenly Tao imbued within them as they hurtled toward Enlin. Enlin's sword also fell, and the golden void lightning transformed into the sharpest bolt of lightning, which was like a sharp, golden crescent moon or a ferocious heavenly dragon. The golden void lightning faltered upon striking Feng Wuya's fist, as if it were clashing violently with some kind of power. Even its shape was warped, and it was showing signs of crumbling. Feng Wuya was ecstatic to see this. However, before he had a chance to celebrate, his fist was pulverized by the bolt of lightning. No, he roared as his body was engulfed by boundless golden void lightning. The barrier around the heavenly Tao fragment was shattered, and the lotus of life and death also had a massive gash sliced into its body as destructive lightning wreaked havoc throughout its entire body. The golden void lightning exploded, creating a series of cracks in the immortal slaying platform. Feng Wuya's entire body was charred black, and his mouth gaped open with white smoke rising from it. His expression was completely blank, as if he had lost consciousness. His body swayed slightly before falling to the ground with a resounding boom. Enlin's golden void lightning cloak dissipated, and his 3 buff spell techniques were also instantly deactivated. A sense of feebleness washed over his entire body like a tidal wave, and he almost fell to the ground as well. But a strong desire to maintain his poise and bearing overcame his physical difficulties, and he stood firm. And Lin stood proudly on the immortal slaying platform in his flowing white robe, as if he were an invincible war god. Immortal King Feng Wuya lay on the ground, barely breathing. The white-robed, exalted immortal's body grew taller and taller. At the peak of Heavenly Mountain, the place where immortals were killed, everyone knew that there were billions of living beings on the Divine Source continent. But the one standing at the pinnacle was no longer immortal King Feng Wuya. Instead, it was the graceful white-robed, exalted immortal. Yang Lingxian stared at the white-robed figure in the distance with a dazed expression. The words spoken on the Griffin's house were still vivid in her mind. There were too many twists and turns in this battle, but the result was just as she had hoped. He had really done it. He had really defeated an immortal king who seemed like he could never be defeated. And Lin made his way toward Feng Wuya. Feng Wuya's life force was extremely tenacious. Perhaps this was a special characteristic of his heaven and earth black lotus divine Tao. He was like a cockroach, and he was still breathing even after taking so many attacks. You can't kill me, Feng Wuya said. Why? And Lin was amused. I'm the most powerful being in this world, and I know many things that you don't. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this world, Feng Wuya said. An impatient expression appeared on Enlin's face. I don't want to die because I talk too much. I'll give you 10 seconds to explain why I can't kill you. After 10 seconds, my sword is going to fall. Feng Wuya faltered upon hearing this. 10 seconds is Enlin. 10, 9. Feng Wuya spoke in a panicked voice. The meteorite crashed into the immortal King Palace and shattered the heavens of the Divine Source continent. I have to use the power of the heart of the heavens to repair this world. If I lose the heart of the heavens, no one will be able to repair the heavens, and all of the living beings on this continent will be destroyed. Huff, huff, huff. The immortal king panted heavily with severe injuries. He had spoken so many words in one go that he almost couldn't catch his breath. Enlin was no longer counting down. He was pondering the immortal king's words. The meteorite was actually a fragment of the heavenly Tao. It wasn't impossible that the fragment of the heavenly Tao had shattered the heavens of this world. After all, that meteorite was a fragment of the heavenly Tao of the Taichu continent. You say you can't repair this world? Enlin was still perplexed. Of course. My divine Tao has the ability to communicate with heaven and earth, and the heart of the heavens only recognizes me. None of the 6 Kun Lun divine generals or the elders have the ability to control the heart of the heavens. Only I can use the heart of the heavens to repair this world. Feng Wuya smiled. The place where the heavens were shattered is in the meteorite mystic area. If I die, you can only walk toward destruction along with this world. This world can't do without me. Give me another 10,000 years, and I'll definitely be able to repair this world. Destruction or survival, you choose. Even though Feng Wuya was lying on the ground, he still wore a proud expression. He knew that no one was unafraid of death. This was his final trump card. Let him live, or let everyone die together. To his surprise, an expression of horror appeared on Enlin's face. 10,000 years. It's going to take 10,000 years? Why is it taking so long? Enlin murmured to himself before bursting into laughter. My God, are you toying with me? Feng Wuya. 10,000 years is too long? You don't have to repair it. So what are you scared of? Feng Wuya could see horror, conflict, and confusion on Enlin's face. Are we talking about the same thing? Why does he feel like there's something wrong with his emotions? What Feng Wuya didn't know was that Enlin was indeed faced with a choice. However, it wasn't a choice between killing Feng Wuya or letting him go so he could continue repairing the heavens. Instead, it was a choice between leaving the heavenly Tao fragment here and allowing the Tai Chu continent to continue toward destruction. Or it was a choice between taking the heavenly Tao fragment for the future of the Tai Chu continent and leading the divine source continent toward destruction. It was an easy choice, wasn't it? There were countless living beings on the Tai Chu continent, including his friends, family, and loved ones. He was just a passerby on the divine source continent, so he could just take the heavenly Tao fragment to his heart's content. He could think of it as saving the majority of living beings and abandoning a small number of living beings. Enlin unwittingly cast his gaze toward the distance to discover a red figure standing atop a mountain. A faint blush appeared on Yang Lingqian's face upon seeing Enlin, but she still waved her hand with a smile, as if she was very happy for him. A bitter smile appeared on Enlin's face. I'm just a passerby, but aren't the billions of living beings on the divine source continent living beings with flesh and blood? Do they deserve to be destroyed? Enlin was suddenly struck by a sense of despair. Why? Why did this have to happen to him? Why did he have to make a choice? Wasn't this the choice that the heavenly lightning god had made for him back in the heavenly beyond heaven? Chapter 1380. In order to save the majority of people, Enlin ended up killing all of them and enduring the pain of being bitten by all sorts of vengeful ghosts. At that time, the heavenly lightning god had told him that there was no need to save them and that they should just let nature take its course. No matter which side he saved, he would become the villain of the other side. This was a very vicious statement, but it reflected the reality of the situation. No matter what Enlin chose, he would always be wrong. No matter what he did, he would always be an executioner who had the blood of countless living beings on his hands. Why? Why do I have to endure all of this? Enlin looked up into the sky with an enraged expression. Before he knew it, his eyes had already become bloodshot with indignation and despair. Feng Wuya stared at Enlin with a blank expression. Do you really want to kill me that badly? He thought that Enlin wanted to kill him, but couldn't, so he was forced to tears. Enlin had never thought about abandoning this responsibility. He didn't want the Tai Chu continent to be destroyed, nor did he want the divine source continent to be destroyed. He wanted to find a way to satisfy both sides. Just as he was about to be forced to the brink of collapse, the evil-slaying sword on his back suddenly lit up. A cold yet tender voice sounded. Hey, idiot, it's just mending the sky. Have you forgotten how I mended the sky in the ancient Tai Chu dragon realm? Enlin shuddered before an expression of ecstasy appeared on his face. Little Xia, you're saying you can mend the sky? The sky of the divine source continent was only blasted open by brute force. It's not like the heavenly Tao has collapsed. So why can't I mend it? Little Xia asked calmly. Her voice was filled with peerless confidence. What are you guys talking about? Feng Wuya's eyes widened. I'm going to save both the Divine Source continent and the Tai Chu continent. And Lin chortled with glee. Feng Wuya what? Splat. A sword plunged into Feng Wuya's chest. Feng Wuya. His eyes widened as he stared blankly at the sword in his chest with incredulity etched on his face. Do you want to die? Feng Wuya roared at the top of his lungs. He had never imagined that he would be stabbed to death by Lin's sword. If he died, who would save the Divine Source continent from destruction? I forgot to tell you, my sword spirit can also mend the sky, so you won't need it. Besides, and Lin pointed at the blue barrier around the immortal beheading platform, I've already used up all my energy, and I can't break the immortal beheading platform's array. If I don't kill you, I won't be able to get out. Feng Wuya, it seemed to make sense. Do you have any last words? And Lin asked. However, he was still quite impressed by Feng Wuya's combat prowess. As the first Dao integration stage super mighty figure to be defeated by him, he had to give the loser some benefits. Feng Wuya could feel the evil-slaying sword in his heart, devouring his life essence relentlessly, and a wry smile appeared on his face. Everyone only knows that I'm a bloodthirsty and violent person, but they don't know the sacrifices I've made for the entire world. Are you saying these last words to disgust me? And Lin asked. Feng Wuya heaved a forlorn sigh. Do you know that the heart of the heavens actually has an attribute? It's an attribute that represents the darkness of the world. It's exactly because of this that it's compatible with my heaven and earth Black Lotus and can borrow its power to aid me. Back when I obtained the heart of the heavens, my power of Yang was suppressed and devoured by the heart of the heavens. Cough, cough. Feng Wuya coughed up a few more mouthfuls of blood as he spoke, and his aura was extremely feeble. So? And Lin asked. He really didn't understand why Feng Wuya's last words were so strange. It was a long string of strange words, but he seemed to be taking it very seriously. Do you know where the core of a person's power of Yang is located? It's my kidney. It's my little dick. A look of grief and indignation appeared on Feng Wuya's face. I'm not really impotent. It's just that my dick has been suppressed by the heart of the heavens. And Lin was astonished. Feng Wuya was still speaking with an excited expression on his face. In order to save the entire continent from destruction, even if I had to lose my dignity as a man, I still had to use the heart of the heavens to mend the heavens. If it weren't for my sacrifice, you wouldn't even have a chance to stand here and fight me. You would have been destroyed along with the entire continent. All right, I understand. And Lin massaged his brows. I'll explain to everyone that you're impotent for the sake of the entire continent. I'm not impotent. I've been suppressed. Cough, cough. Feng Wuya threw up a few more mouthfuls of blood as his blood boiled. I'm quite curious about one thing. If you're impotent, then why are you still recruiting all the beauties in the world to join your harem? And Lin was perplexed. Feng Wuya chuckled with a meaningful expression. I can't have sex with those peerless beauties, so why can others? I'm not going to give them a chance. And Lin's mouth gaped open in shock again. At this moment, the evil-slaying sword in Feng Wuya's chest glowed with a scintillating divine light imbued with the power of annihilation, instantly pulverizing Feng Wuya's body. How disgusting, little Xie said in a cold voice. And Lin didn't even get a chance to do anything before little Xie delivered the final blow. She clearly couldn't take this any longer. And Lin heaved a resigned sigh upon seeing this. Not taking into account anything else, just these last words alone were the most outlandish last words he had ever heard. However, seeing as Feng Wuya was so insistent, and Lin could still do his best to clarify his impotence. A burst of invisible power seemed to float into the sky. The blue barrier around the immortal slaying platform disappeared. In the sky above, black lotus petals suddenly floated down, covering a radius of 1,000 miles. It was both beautiful and desolate. At the same time, an extremely dense origin chi surged in the void, causing the cultivation of countless creatures to increase by a large margin. Some even comprehended the concept, seemingly comprehending something. A Dao integration stage mighty figure had fallen. Heaven and earth mourned for the death of a Dao integration stage mighty figure. Immortal King Feng Wuya really had died this time. Even though most of the 1 million cultivators here wanted nothing more than for the Immortal King to die, they were still struck by a sense of grief upon seeing this. Perhaps these 1,000-kilometer lotus flower petals and the remnant Tao Realm True Intent were his final gift to the world, at the place where Feng Wuya's body had disappeared. An incorporeal crystal floated in the air, constantly changing its shape. At times, it seemed to have a physical form, and at other times, it disappeared into thin air as if it had never existed. Lin was a little curious, and he made a grabbing motion toward the crystal, only to find that his hand had passed through it, as if it were nothing more than air. What's going on? He was a little perplexed, and he made a few more grabbing attempts, only to find nothing. So you're not accepting me? Lin harumphed coldly. Even that impotent Feng Wuya accepted you, but you're not accepting me? Wait, didn't Feng Wuya only become impotent after being accepted by the heavenly Tao fragment? Lin's heart jolted with shock, and he took a couple of steps back before heaving a sigh of relief with lingering fear in his heart. My God, thank God the heavenly Tao fragment didn't accept me. If it did, then what would I do if I became impotent? And Lin was secretly celebrating his good fortune. So be it. I'll just let Ishi take the heavenly Tao fragment. His master wanted it anyway, so he should take it back as his disciple. Chapter 1381. And Lin was conflicted over what to do with the heavenly Tao fragment. Over 1 million cultivators had just witnessed the fall of the Immortal King, and they were all sighing with emotion. They had also seen the heavenly Tao fragment, but none of them dared to look at it. After all, it belonged to the new most powerful being on the Divine Source continent, the white-robed, exalted immortal, and Lin. The 6 Kunlun divine generals were filled with grief and incredulity. They looked up at the black lotus flower petals raining down from the sky, and they felt as if the Immortal King were bidding farewell to them. Yanji opened her hand to catch the falling flower petals, but the flower petals simply passed through her hand like a mirage. A hint of melancholy appeared on her flawless features. The era of Immortal King Feng Wuya has come to an end. The river god wiped tears from his eyes. Wah! Big brother Immortal King has always been invincible in my heart. How could he have lost? Xinglong gripped his spear tightly. The white-robed, exalted immortal has just been through a battle, and he's at his weakest. We can take this opportunity to kill him. Xinglong's words caused the expressions of the other 5 divine generals to change. However, they hesitated as they looked at the figure standing proudly on the immortal slaying platform. And Lin's invincible form during his previous battle had already left them in awe. He's indeed feeble, but a starving camel is still larger than a horse. Poison Flower pointed a finger, and a vibrant violet flower blossomed on her fingertip before quickly wilting away. I've done some divination, and if all 6 of us attack the white-robed, exalted immortal at once, our chances of winning are less than 5%. Why not die to avenge the Immortal King? Wolf Fong bared his fangs as he glowered at the white-robed figure with a ferocious expression. Gue Tung shook his withered tree trunk as he spoke in a hoarse voice. During this battle on the immortal slaying platform, both the Immortal King and the white-robed, exalted immortal displayed power that was far beyond our imagination. If this were in the past, I would have been confident that we could kill him together, but now, he didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence, but all of the other divine generals knew what he was thinking. Yinji couldn't help but burst into laughter. The white-robed, exalted immortal is currently within the immortal slaying platform. If we enter one of them, a barrier will appear, and we'll have to fight one-on-one. Attack him together? Are you guys dreaming? Wolf. Awkward expressions appeared on the faces of all the divine generals. They had said so much, only to be slapped in the face by Yanji. If you ask me, Yanji said in a seductive voice, let's hurry up and escape into the depths of the mountains and forests. The world has already changed. If we don't escape now, do you think we'll be able to survive in the future? Her words finally caused the hearts of the Kunlun god generals to waver once more. Regardless of whether you leave or not, I'll be taking my leave now. I can't let my 1,000 wives and concubines become widows at such a young age. Yenji chuckled as she drew a circle of flames in the air with her finger, and a spatial gate appeared before her. With Yenji gone, the other 5 divine generals knew that there was no way they could continue fighting. The era of the immortal king, their era, had already come to an end. Let's go. Our lives are more important. Sigh, where there's life, there's life. Everyone, take care. One by one, the divine generals began to bid farewell. At the same time, within the spring light palace of the immortal king palace, immortal empress Yin Shuqin was currently playing a battle song on her immortal zither. Her slender and fair fingers quickly plucked the 7 strings of the zither. The sound of the zither was intense, like the raging waves of the sea, and also like the collision of stars. Within the explosion, there was an impassioned feeling. Bam! The sound of something being stretched taut to the extreme erupted before snapping. The strings of the immortal zither snapped, and blood stained the zither red. A series of bloody gashes appeared on Yin Shuqin's slender fingers, which then stained her hands red. A light breeze blew past, and the leaves outside the window rustled. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, and her expression was tinged with a hint of sorrow as she curtsied toward the sky in the distance. Rest in peace, husband. Within the black, square-shaped building within the meteorite mystic area, Ishi was still unable to find the heavenly Tao fragment. He was a little agitated when he suddenly detected a hint of energy fluctuation from the black lotus at the very center. It seemed to have lost some kind of energy source, and its energy was constantly flowing away. What the hell is this? He circulated the power of his pill before abruptly unleashing a palm toward the black lotus. The black lotus was instantly shattered by the power of his palm. It was extremely fragile after losing its energy source. However, before Ishi had a chance to rejoice, a red pillar of light shot up into the sky from underground, shattering the roof of the black building before shooting straight up into the heavens. Ishi's mouth gaped open in shock. Did I do something wrong? He was shocked to discover that a ghastly rift had appeared in the sky. The destructive power of chaos began to descend upon the world, as if it were going to destroy everything. The earth quaked and space shattered. The immortal king palace was struck by a calamity, and countless living beings began to flee in all directions. The elders and the Kuan Luan divine generals who had just returned to the immortal king palace were all dumbstruck by the sight of the sky shattering. They were still in a daze at this apocalyptic scene. Ishi's legs were a little weak. It's over. I think I've stabbed a hole in the sky. On the immortal slaying platform, Lin had also detected the commotion in the distance. The sky is shattering after the immortal king's death. I don't have time, but if I leave the heavenly Tao fragment here, what if someone else takes it? Lin was a little distressed. He discovered that the heavenly Tao fragment was completely ignoring him. No matter how hard he tried to grab it, it was as if it didn't exist. Divine inspection technique. The heavenly Tao fragment was a physical manifestation of a flaw in the Tai Chu continent's heavenly Tao. The explanation was very simple. However, Lin knew that the simpler something was, the more complicated it was. The heavenly Tao fragment was flashing rapidly, as if it had been triggered by the shattering of the heavens. A small white ball appeared at the center of the heavenly Tao fragment. What's this? Lin was a little curious as he extended a hand toward the ball. It was cold to the touch and gave him a very comfortable feeling. Furthermore, a peculiar feeling surged through his entire body. It was as if he was holding the entire world in his hand. After Lin took the ball, the white crystal was still flashing and transforming in the air. This ball wasn't the heavenly Tao fragment, so what was it? Divine inspection technique. The seed of the realm core was a seed born from the heavenly Tao that contained the vitality of the world. It possessed unfathomable power and was known to have the ability to transform or repair the realm core. Lin was astonished. He seemed to have obtained something extraordinary. The realm core on the Tai Chu continent was complete, but didn't Tina have a fragment of the realm core in her divine mirror world? Could she use this seed of the realm core to transform the fragment of the realm core in her divine mirror world into a complete realm core? And Lin was suddenly filled with anticipation as he stowed the seed into his storage ring. At this moment, the heavenly Tao fragment seemed to have been stimulated and suddenly pounced toward Lin. Chapter 1382. And Lin's chest was rammed viciously into the heavenly Tao fragment. Thankfully, the force wasn't very strong, and the heavenly Tao fragment was a little feeble. If it had rammed into him with the same force as it had rammed into the heavens of the divine source continent, and Lin would probably have been reduced to dust. "Oh my, you're so heavy, you little baddie." And Lin chuckled with disdain in his eyes. He thought to himself, "What can you do to me with your level of strength?" The white crystal was a little indignant, as if it were a child whose toy had been snatched away. It retreated for a distance and was just about to unleash another attack on Enlin. However, a thought suddenly occurred to Enlin. "Wait, doesn't that mean you've taken on a physical form?" His eyes lit up, and he immediately unleashed his wings of wind and Kuan Peng travel to instantly appear before the heavenly Tao fragment. The heavenly Tao fragment didn't expect Enlin to suddenly attack, and it was unable to evade in time. Immediately afterward, an extremely powerful spatial force swept toward it. The heavenly Tao fragment was sucked into a supreme-grade storage ring in its physical form. "Phew, I've finally succeeded." Enlin heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He touched his lower body, and, thankfully, he could still feel the fragment. Perhaps only after fusing the heavenly Tao fragment into his body would he be able to experience the same after-effects as Feng Wuya's. Rumble, an earth-shattering ripping sound, erupted in the distance. The cracks in the sky had already begun to intensify, and dark, chaotic energy was destroying everything around it. The spatial rifts had transformed heaven and earth into a perilous realm. Most of the immortal King Palace had been reduced to rubble. Several dozen volcanoes around the heavenly mountain began to erupt at the same time, spewing forth scorching lava and poisonous gases, as if blood were gushing forth from the ground. Over 1 million cultivators began to flee for their lives in fear. The doomsday-like scene and the extremely terrifying aura of destruction let them know that this matter was no longer something they could interfere with. Even the return to Void Stage, exalted immortals were horrified. "My God, is this really the end of the world? It's over. If things continue like this, where are we going to run to?" Many cultivators were already in despair. Of course, there were also some experts who looked at the figure on the immortal slaying platform with anticipation. They knew that the white-robed, exalted immortal was the only one who could turn this around and bring hope to this world. And Lin pondered for a moment before deciding that there was no time to lose, and he immediately flew toward the immortal King Palace. The white-robed, exalted immortal is on the move again. The place he's going to is the place where the sky broke. In the face of a great calamity, that white robe is still the most dazzling. While the other cultivators chose to flee, the white-robed figure who went against the flow and charged directly towards the Sky Destroyer was extremely dazzling. Yang Lingqian gritted her teeth and followed behind Enlin without any hesitation. Although she didn't know what was the point of following him, she wanted to see Enlin fight. She wanted to see Enlin win the battle. She chased after the white-clothed figure in front of her. However, her cultivation was simply too low. The more she chased, the further she went. The more she chased, the more she couldn't see that silhouette anymore. A massive sense of disappointment welled up in her heart as the figure gradually disappeared from her sight. A stubborn expression appeared on Yang Lingqian's face as she continued to give chase. Within the meteorite mystic region, at the center of the Sky Destroyer, Ishii was using agile movement techniques to evade all types of chaotic energy. It's over. What do I do? If things continue like this, countless lives are going to be lost." He evaded the attacks like a ping-pong ball as he spoke with an extremely urgent voice. Right at this moment, a white-robed figure flew through the air. Yanji was just about to flee with all of her beloved concubines when she caught sight of the white figure flying through the air. Yan Shuqin, who was evacuating all of the Spring Light Palace concubines, also caught sight of a determined figure flying toward the center of the Sky Destroyer. At the center of the dark vortex, crimson lightning wreaked havoc as chaotic winds of annihilation swept through the air in a frenzy. The white figure was like a moth flying toward a flame, but it was extremely dazzling, as if it were the only source of light in an apocalyptic world. Countless living beings were rooted to the spot upon seeing this figure. Yang Lingqian's eyes were completely entranced as she stared intently at the man charging into the Sky Destroyer. Her fingers were clasped tightly in front of her chest, and she was extremely nervous as she prayed incessantly. Boom, boom, boom. Countless chaotic winds of annihilation swept toward Lin. The crimson lightning was like an apocalyptic demon as it pounced toward Lin in an extremely menacing manner. The terrifying might and sense of pressure it exuded could easily pulverize a return to Void Stage mighty figure into dust. And Lin made a series of hand seals before drawing the evil-slaying sword from his back and slashing it down. An inky black sword intent pierced through the sky, repelling all of the wind and lightning. Go! And Lin raised his evil-slaying sword with a single hand and stabbed it toward the hole in the sky. A divine light erupted forth for over 500 kilometers, enshrouding heaven and earth. Whoosh! An invisible ripple proliferated throughout heaven and earth. Everything seemed to have come to a standstill. Regardless of whether it was the surging wind and clouds or the devastating lightning, everything was as still as a painting. Only the evil-slaying sword emanated the purest, inky black light, which extended outward to fill the hole in the sky. Immediately afterward, it was as if time had been reversed, and the rift began to contract as destructive power began to pour into the heavens. Everyone was completely entranced by this scene. The dark clouds slowly dissipated, and the sun began to shine down upon the earth. Everything became tranquil and tranquil. Only one person remained standing in the sky. His white robe danced around him, and his features were as exquisite as jade. On this day, countless people would never be able to forget this figure. My God, am I witnessing a divine miracle? The white-robed, exalted immortal slaying an immortal king on the immortal slaying platform was already astonishing enough. But now, he's mending the heavens as well. Is there anything he can't do? He's the savior of the world. He saved all of us. The white-robed, exalted immortal, and Lin, is a living legend. He's the epitome of invincibility. Countless cultivators who witnessed all of this spoke excitedly, their hearts filled with admiration. Yin Shuqin looked up into the sky with a pleasant smile on her face. This world is about to usher in a new era after being reborn from destruction. The new master of this world doesn't seem to be too bad. The shattered sky had been repaired, but not only was little Xie not exhausted, she was even more excited, as if she really enjoyed doing this. She looked like she was going to die if she wasn't given any work to do. And Lin was a little exasperated as he silently sheathed his sword. The probability of the sky shattering was extremely low, so where was he going to find another shattered world for little Xie to repair? Speaking of which, he had been to other worlds recently, and he had encountered many shattered worlds. First was the ancient Taichu Dragon Realm, then the Divine Source Continent. Was he going to become a world-demolishing monster? And Lin, a gentle voice sounded from behind him. And Lin turned around to discover an exquisitely beautiful woman in a red dress. Her skin was as fair as snow, and she was looking at him with a vibrant smile. Oh, it's Yang Lingqian. How was it? Was I handsome just then? And Lin asked with a smile. Yang Lingqian was a little embarrassed, and a seductive blush appeared on her face as she nodded. You were very handsome. You were handsome from head to toe. This time, she wasn't giving a perfunctory reply. Instead, she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. She raised her head and looked directly at Lin, as if she had mustered up her courage. And you were so handsome that I couldn't take my eyes off you. And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. He was a little embarrassed by this compliment. He looked into her eyes, and he felt as if he could see some kind of emotion hidden within her scorching gaze. Huh. And Lin patted the woman's head with a smile. Let's go. It's time to collect some spoils of war. Collect spoils of war. Yang Lingxian came to her senses and asked with a blush on her face. And Lin waved the Immortal King's storage ring in his hand. There aren't any treasures in here. The Immortal King Palace must have hidden treasures somewhere. I have to calculate the spoils of war. Chapter 1383. Loot? Are you going to confiscate the loot? Yang Lingxian asked. That's right, I'm going to confiscate it. And Lin chuckled. Yang Lingxian couldn't help but burst into laughter. You're such a straightforward savior. The two of them descended from the sky. None of the cultivators who had yet to escape from the Immortal King Palace dared to stop them. The white-robed, exalted immortal is here. Run. Who's that female immortal? They seem to be quite close. Could she be the white-robed, exalted immortal's Tao partner? Some of the concubines looked at the two figures in the distance with heartache. Yang Lingxian didn't know what kind of stir and Lin's patting of her head would create across the entire Divine Source continent and change her status. And Lin landed in the meteorite mystic area and was immediately greeted by a round hug. Alchemy Patriarch, your performance just then was so mesmerizing. Your stature is so majestic and reliable that I can no longer use words to express my admiration for you. Ishi was extremely excited, and Lin's expression darkened. So you're using your unique hug to express your emotions? Ishi's body was like a ball, and his stomach was propped up against Lin's body, so he couldn't hug Lin at all. As such, he could only extend his arms to form a water snake hug. Meanwhile, Lin was also hugging Ishi as if he were hugging a ball, and it was a very strange feeling. Yang Lingxian couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing Lin's reaction. Even though these two exalted immortals were a little strange, they were both extremely powerful. Outside the meteorite mystic area, there were still 3 top-rate elders and the Immortal King envoy lying on the ground with severe injuries. They had most likely been crippled by the round fatso, and they were still recovering from their injuries. And Lin made his way over to Grand Elder Fu Haotsong. Where's the Immortal King Palace's storage? Tell me the truth, and I can spare your life. I won't betray the Immortal King even if I die. Fu Haotsong roared. Bam! And Lin slapped his palm toward Fu Haotsong, reducing him to dust. The other 3 top-notch exalted immortals were dumbfounded by what they saw. The great elder Fu Haotsong, who had shaken the entire continent, had suddenly died. The impact on their minds was not small, and Lin wasn't going to show any mercy to someone like this. Fu Haotsong was Feng Wuya's most loyal subordinate, and he was also the man who had committed the most crimes, so he had to die. And Lin then turned to second Elder Wang Chun and asked, Do you know where the Immortal King Palace keeps its treasures? The more detailed you are, the less severe your punishment will be. On the contrary, he glanced at Sun Biyu and Luo Yin. The more silent you are, don't blame me for being ruthless. The 3 of them trembled at the same time. They knew that Lin was not joking. I know where the treasure vault of the Immortal King Palace is. Wang Chen urged. I also know where Feng Wuya's personal treasure vault is. Sun Biyu blushed. Wang Chun and Luo Yin both turned to the female elder beside them with peculiar expressions. White-robed, exalted immortal, I know where the Immortal King ambassadors are looking for treasures. The leader of the Immortal King ambassadors also chimed in, and Lin was a little surprised. He didn't think that all 3 of them would choose to give in. Actually, his invincible battle prowess and the great elder's straightforward death had long since caused the 3 of them to completely lose the will to resist. They only had 2 choices now. The first was to surrender, and the second was to go underground with Feng Wuya. The vast majority of them would choose to surrender. After all, Feng Wuya wasn't a master who was worthy of their loyalty. He had only been able to conquer them with his absolute power. Now, Feng Wuya's only strength had been surpassed by Lin, so how could they go underground with Feng Wuya? After just a single day, the remaining forces of the Immortal King Palace either fled or surrendered. and Lin stood in front of the treasure vault of the immortal King Palace and slowly pushed open the enchantment barrier. And Lin instantly felt as if he were going to be blinded by a blinding light. Countless spirit stones, vital stones, spirit pills, miraculous medicines, powerful weapons, and all types of exotic treasures were piled up like mountains. However, they weren't piled up randomly. Instead, there was a mountain of spirit stones, a mountain of spirit pills, a mountain of magic tools, and a mountain of spirit tools. They were distributed in an extremely orderly fashion. Wang Chun explained, "This is where the immortal king gathers all of the resources on the divine source continent." And Lin's eyes widened. "All of this is mine?" Wang Chun replied in a respectful manner. "You're now the master of the immortal king palace, so you have the absolute right to distribute these resources." Even though he said this, he was grumbling internally. "You're the most bad asterisk SS on the entire continent right now. So how could I say that all of these resources are mine?" Yang Lingqian was also dumbstruck. She could swear that she had never seen so many treasures in her life. And Lin smiled. "Ishi, let's talk about how we're going to distribute these treasures first." Ishi splayed his hands open with a nonchalant expression. "My goal here is to bring the heavenly Tao fragment to master. Everything else doesn't matter to me. Besides, I didn't really contribute much during the final battle. You killed immortal King Feng Wuya and repaired the shattered heavens. You could take all of these treasures. I don't want them." And Lin turned to Ishi with a hint of surprise on his face. Ishi's indifferent attitude toward fame and fortune had once again changed in Lin's impression of him. Even though Ishi said that he didn't need them, and Lin still insisted on giving him some things. They had fought and risked their lives together. So even if they didn't contribute much, they had still put in a lot of effort. Ishi was unable to dissuade in Lin's insistence, so he accepted all of the spirit pills. He needed these spirit pills for his alchemy cultivation. On top of that, Ishi had taken 3,600 spirit pills from the immortal King Palace's treasure vault. That's right, it was that extravagant. There were a total of 3,600 extremely precious spirit pills. The rest all belonged to Enlin. Enlin swept the treasure vault clean. Immediately afterward, he began to look at the items in his storage ring, and his face became flushed as his breathing accelerated. Enlin, who had always prided himself on being a tycoon in the Taichu continent, was completely blinded by his wealth. He had obtained a total of 850 million spirit stones. Just this alone was enough to make Enlin almost stop breathing from excitement. Spirit tools, 650. Spirit rank treasures, 1,600. There were over 10,000 rare treasures and magic tools in total. Enlin was already at a complete loss for words at the sight of this terrifying wealth. However, thinking about it, it made sense. One had to realize that immortal King Feng Wuya had done everything in his power to exploit the wealth of all of the major empires. Even though the treasures on the Divine Source continent were inferior to those on the Taichu continent, the combined wealth was still extremely astonishing. The treasures are indeed astonishing, but why isn't there even a single immortal rank treasure? Enlin was still a little perplexed. One had to realize that even though the Divine Source continent wasn't very powerful, there should still be a lot of immortal rank treasures. White-robed, exalted immortal. All of the best treasures are in Feng Wuya's personal treasure vault. I'll take you there. Sun Bu made her way over and bowed with a shy expression, and Lin's body shuddered. Chapter 1384. What a private treasure vault. So all the immortal rank treasures were there? And Lin was very excited, but a calm expression appeared on his face. If that's the case, then lead the way. I want to see just how many filthy treasures this evil immortal king has hidden away. Sun Bu's lips twitched, and she nodded obediently. Please come with me, white-robed, exalted immortal. After ransacking the immortal King Palace treasure vault, they began to make their way toward the immortal king's private treasure vault. With Feng Wuya's personality, he wanted to keep everything for himself, so there had to be a lot of unimaginable treasures in this private treasure vault. Everyone arrived at the immortal king's main bedroom in the Spring Light Palace. Sun Bu activated a mechanism, and the ground split open to reveal a secret passageway that led downward. Everyone walked down the passageway to discover that there was a circular black enchantment barrier up ahead. Crap, there's an enchantment barrier set up by Immortal King Feng Wuya here. This might be a little troublesome. An awkward expression appeared on San Biyu's face. When she had come here with Feng Wuya, this enchantment barrier hadn't existed. Feng Wuya must have removed the enchantment barrier prior to her arrival. Even the simplest enchantment barrier set up by a Dao integration stage super mighty figure was extremely terrifying. Just as everyone was looking at this with grave expressions. Boom! A white light flashed through Enlin's eyes, and he flicked a finger, upon which the black enchantment barrier shattered like glass. An enchantment barrier of his caliber is useless. Enlin spoke in a cold voice before leading the way. All of the exalted immortals drew a sharp intake of breath. The enchantment barrier set up by Immortal King Feng Wuya was unable to withstand a casual attack from the white-robed exalted immortal, as expected of the number one exalted immortal on the divine source continent. Wang Chun, Luo Yin, and the others all wore expressions of awe and veneration as they carefully followed behind Enlin. In contrast, Ishi had a completely natural expression on his face. Wasn't it normal for a mighty alchemy patriarch to do something like this? Enlin continued onward without any obstructions, and he arrived before a black metal gate with lotus flowers carved onto its surface before crushing the gate to dust with a single slap. All of a sudden, an extremely dazzling light erupted from within the gate, and at the same time, a rich immortal treasure aura erupted forth, almost knocking him flying. This is the power of immortal treasures formed naturally by many immortal items. Enlin drew a sharp intake of breath as a look of shock appeared on his face. This time, not only Enlin, but even Ishi, who regarded treasures as dirt, was completely entranced. Yang Lingqian's body trembled slightly, and she almost fainted from excitement. Although these treasures did not have much to do with her, she was still very excited. It was like a beggar who saw a mountain of gold. Even if the gold didn't belong to him, his heart would still beat faster, and he might even suffer a heart attack. In front of Enlin, there were immortal weapons, immortal pills, and all kinds of immortal treasures. He immediately activated his divine inspection technique without any hesitation. Giant Spirit Devouring Heart Brush, Winged Dragon Gauntlet, Divine Vitality Talisman, Sky Poison Purple Gold Saber, Sky Fire Red Heart Bracelet, Golden Sun Immortal Pill, Shattering 9 Funeral Pill, Ancient Autumn Immortal Pill, Hades Winged Dragon Pill, Jade Immortal Grass Soul Immortal Pill, 9 Revolutions Soul Condensing Pill, Immortal Grade Materials, Profound Ice Magic Grass, Ghost Lotus Vine, Heavenly Demon Bone, Pure Ice Copper, Desolate Ancient Coconut Tree. Too many. There were simply too many. Enlin had never seen so many immortal rank treasures in his life. 23 immortal weapons, 38 immortal pills, and 106 immortal rank materials. There were even 3 divine rank materials, which are the Lightning Essence Star Crystal, the Primordial Demonic Bone, and the Book from the Heavens. However, there were probably no tool refinement masters in this world who could refine divine tools, so there weren't any divine tools. Under Enlin's insistence, Ishi reluctantly accepted the 8 immortal pills. Thus, Enlin stowed away 23 immortal weapons, 30 immortal pills, 106 immortal rank materials, and 3 divine rank materials. Gongsun Biyu, Wang Chun, Luo Yin, and the others swallowed involuntarily upon seeing this. You really are an evil tyrant. To think that you would hide so many treasures that you've plundered. What a ghastly sight. Enlin spoke with a righteous expression. When the group of elders heard this, the corners of their mouths could not help but twitch. Please, when you say this, can you not laugh so happily? Enlin turned to Luo Yin. It's your turn now. Where's the place where the immortal king's envoy is gathering all these treasures? Luo Yin bowed respectfully. Please come with me, white-robed, exalted immortal. Everyone moved to another location. This time, they arrive at a black lake deep within the Immortal King Palace. Most of the buildings around the Immortal King Palace had already been reduced to rubble, but the black lake was completely unscathed. It was still as smooth and flawless as a black gemstone. A crimson divine Tao flame appeared in Luo Yan's hand as he drew a circle over the black lake. Black water cave open. The lake water began to churn and splash before converging to form a circular black hole. This is the place, white-robed, exalted immortal. Luo Yan spoke with a respectful expression, and Lin nodded before following Luo Yan into the circular black hole. After entering the black hole, they were greeted by the sight of an extremely peculiar crystal mine. These crystal mines were inky black in color, and they appeared to be extremely profound, as if they were plunged into a dark abyss. And Lin was a little astonished at the sight of the crystal ores that littered the ground. He could confirm that these ores were definitely no ordinary ores. Luo Yan bowed respectfully. White-robed, exalted immortal. These are the crystals that our immortal king's envoy has gathered for thousands of years. They are known as dark crystals, and they contain extremely rich dark-type energy. They can assist in the observation of the Tao of Yin, as well as unleash a one-time dark-type energy. Immortal King Feng Weia ordered his envoy to gather these crystals for thousands of years just for these things. Lin was a little incredulous as he looked at the black crystal mines before him. Don't underestimate these crystals, white-robed, exalted immortal. Setting aside the fact that they are extremely beneficial to the cultivation of dark-type cultivators, just the detonation material alone is extremely terrifying. A single dark crystal can severely wound or even kill a top-rate, exalted immortal. Luo Yan warned with a serious expression. Lin was shocked. It's that bad *SS? Then why didn't the immortal king use them against me? An awkward expression appeared on Luo Yan's face. He looked at Lin with a hint of fear, but there was also a hint of yearning in his eyes. Perhaps the immortal king didn't want to waste these dark crystals? Perhaps he thought that killing you would be a piece of cake. Luo Yan's speculation was very reasonable. This was most likely Immortal King Feng Weya's true thoughts as well. However, the grass on the Immortal King's grave was already 30 feet tall. Also, these dark crystals have a very special effect. Luo Yan said in a hushed voice. Oh, what effect? Lin asked. If an enemy is struck by a dark crystal, the dark crystal will release a special type of spiritual power that can engulf the enemy's consciousness and render them retarded. In other words, the enemy can easily become retarded by the explosion. Powerful enemies may only become retarded for a short period of time, but weaker enemies will definitely become permanently retarded. Luo Yan explained with a solemn expression, and Lin's eyes lit up upon hearing this. He really wanted to try out such a special effect. Thus, he turned toward Luo Yan and the others. Chapter 1385. Luo Yan and the others turned pale with fright. Lin's expression was simply too terrifying. White-robed, exalted immortal, we've told you everything we know. You promised to give us a lighter sentence. Wang Chun spoke in a trembling voice. Lin didn't really want to use the dark crystals on them. He just wanted to give it a try. Now that he thought about it, there were actually quite a few targets for him to experiment on, so there was no need to use Wang Chun and the others as he had other uses for them. All right, I'll spare your lives. Lin nodded. Aside from a deceased Grand Elder Fu Haozong and the 6 Kunlun divine generals who had escaped, all of the other elders were actually quite moderate, so he could try to teach them a lesson. You may be spared, but you cannot escape punishment. All of you must swear Tao heart vows that you will no longer bully the weak, and you will carry out every single policy of the 4-9 Immortal Palace and swear loyalty to the 4-9 Immortal Sect for the rest of your lives. Lin spoke with a solemn expression. Wang Chun, Luo Yan, and Sun Biyu immediately nodded upon hearing this. However, they soon came to their senses. Wait, what's going on with the 4-9 Immortal Palace and the 4-9 Immortal Sect? Luo Yan faltered momentarily before asking. Lin clasped his hands behind his back. From this day forth, there will be no more Immortal King Palace. There will only be the 4-9 Immortal Palace. The three of them stirred upon hearing this. Even the Immortal King was dead, so it was naturally the white-robed, exalted immortals' turn to rule over the entire divine source continent. The man before them was the most revered living being in this world, so whatever he said was the law. With this in mind, the three of them bowed again. Yes, Immortal King. Immortal King. Huh. Don't give me such a vulgar title. Unlin was not happy to hear this. Awkward expressions appeared on Luo Yin and the others' faces. What was wrong with the king of immortals? Please refer to me as Immortal Emperor. And Lin replied, Luo Yin, Wang Chun, and Sun Biu, huh? I'm just joking. You can continue to refer to me as the white-robed, exalted immortal. I quite like that title, so don't try to be formal with me. And Lin waved his hand indifferently. Everyone was grumbling internally. Was the white-robed, exalted immortal not a formalist? After that, the three elders swore an oath on their Tao hearts and made an oath that was akin to losing their rights and humiliating their country. Once they violated the oath, their Tao hearts would collapse and they would lose all their cultivation. This result was actually better than what they had imagined. However, it was a little strange that they could not hurt or humiliate those with low cultivation. Weren't powerful, exalted immortals supposed to be the most precious people in the world? Wasn't it perfectly justified for him to occasionally bully creatures that were weaker than him? This was the culture of the divine source continent. The strong were revered to the extreme. If you were the most powerful living being, then the other living beings would be convinced. If a lower realm met a higher realm living being, they would have to kneel and pay their respects. The Immortal King's envoy belonged to the core faction of the Immortal King. Thus, the Immortal King's envoy would be revered by everyone. Of course, these were deep-rooted beliefs that Enlin would gradually change over time. He had established the 4-9 Immortal Palace for this very reason. He wanted to improve this world. Ishi actually couldn't understand what Enlin was doing. If it were up to Ishi, he could just go back after taking the heavenly Tao fragment. What did this world have to do with them? Moreover, the greatest tumor, the Immortal King, was already dead, and the world would gain a new lease of life. Sooner or later, it would return to the era where 100 schools of thought contended and a myriad of sects were established. However, Enlin didn't share the same sentiments. In a situation where they were without a leader, every upheaval that occurred meant that war would ensue and countless lives would be lost. He really couldn't just leave like that. He could just treat it as taking so many of Feng Wuya's treasures as a way to do good deeds. And Lin arrived at the main palace of the Immortal King Palace, and to his surprise, he discovered an extremely beautiful woman standing respectfully off to the side. She immediately knelt to Enlin and extended a respectful salute. I am Yin Shuqin, and I pay my respects to the white-robed, exalted immortal. You're the Immortal Queen, Yin Shuqin? Enlin was a little surprised. Yin Shuqin was a returned to void, intermediate stage, exalted immortal, and she had a very good opportunity to escape when the heavens had been shattered. The Immortal King is already dead, so I don't deserve to be referred to as the Immortal Queen anymore. You can just refer to me by my name. Yin Shuqin's voice was gentle and sweet, like cotton candy, and she was completely devoid of the ferocity and experience of a palace mistress. And Lin nodded as his expression eased slightly. All right, little Qin, please rise. Tell me why you're here. Yin Shuqin stood up with a faint smile on her exquisitely beautiful face. There are still 623 concubines in the Springlight Palace who are willing to stay to serve you, white-robed, exalted immortal. Or would you like to visit them, Immortal King? And Lin drew a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. They're willing to serve me? Those are the concubines of the Immortal King. It's not like I'm into them. Yin Shuqin pursed her lips before speaking in a gentle voice. White-robed, exalted immortal, you're aware of Immortal King Feng Wuya's condition. Those 600 or so concubines are actually still virgins, and they're all willing to throw themselves into your arms. All you have to do is nod your head, and they're all yours. Gasp. All he had to do was nod his head, and he could have a harem of over 600 beauties? And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing this. It had to be said, this was really quite exciting. However, he felt like he had seen something like this before. There were over 1,000 concubines, but over half of them were still willing to stay by his side. It seemed that the elimination method of the 2,000 people strategy was quite effective. He had successfully eliminated all of these women who were willing to give up many things in order to climb up the ladder. As for whether he could keep all of these concubines who were willing to serve him, wasn't Lin that kind of person? The white-robed, exalted immortal, said that I would give them freedom, and I will give them freedom. Do they want to stay by my side? Sorry, I don't like to have a harem. And Lin replied in an indifferent voice. Yin Shuqin turned to Enlin with a dumbstruck expression. In this world, all powerful beings were revered and had many wives and concubines. The white-robed, exalted immortal didn't even want beauties who were offering themselves to him? Why? Yin Shuqin couldn't help but ask. And Lin looked at Yin Shuqin with a serious expression. Because my heart is very small, and it can only contain one person. Yin Shuqin was dumbstruck. This was the first time she had heard something like this, and it was coming from the mouth of the most powerful being on the divine source continent. This was the first time she had ever been struck by a peculiar feeling. Her heart rate accelerated for some reason, and she was no longer as calm and collected as before. Yang Lingqian was also staring blankly at the man before her. In that case, if that person was referring to her, then she would definitely be the happiest person in this world. However, she knew that this was impossible. Dismiss all of the concubines in the Spring Light Palace. Just give them some spirit stones. Also, I don't understand why you haven't left yet. And Lin turned to Yin Shuqin. Chapter 1386. Why hadn't he left yet? Yin Shuqin didn't really know the answer to this question. Perhaps it was because she was afraid that the white-robed, exalted immortal would be enraged by her departure and destroy her family. Perhaps it was also because she yearned for this legendary man. Perhaps it was purely out of curiosity, and she wanted to see what kind of man the white-robed, exalted immortal was like. Thankfully, she had made the right choice. She felt like the white-robed, exalted immortal was even more perfect than she had imagined. The only thing that was a little frustrating to her was that the white-robed, exalted immortal seemed to be completely unmoved by her exceptional beauty. His heart was too small and could only contain one person. But he could have her in his eyes. Many thoughts flashed through Yin Shuqin's mind in that instant, but a vibrant smile soon appeared on her face as she asked in a gentle voice, "Will the white-robed, exalted immortal let me go?" Her cultivation aptitude was top-notch. She was extremely beautiful, and she was extremely talented. She was naturally not going to fall for someone who was too ordinary for her taste. The white-robed, exalted immortal had fulfilled all of her fantasies about the man of her dreams. Yin Shuqin was confident that there was no woman on this entire continent who could surpass her in terms of beauty. She had already expressed her goodwill, so the white-robed, exalted immortal would most likely be tempted no matter how high his expectations were. She stood on the spot with her white dress fluttering in the wind, making her appear like a snow lotus in full bloom. She was exquisitely beautiful as she looked at Enlin with her limpid eyes that were filled with a different kind of emotion. Enlin was quite stunned by Yin Shuqin's beauty, and he nodded with a smile. I naturally wouldn't want you to leave like this. As expected, all men were captivated by her charms. Yin Shuqin raised her head slightly, and a hint of confidence welled up in her heart. A faint smile appeared on her delicate features, and she appeared to be a little shy and a little hesitant, as if she wanted to say something. She paused momentarily before speaking in a gentle voice. If you don't want me to leave, then I wouldn't dare to. Oh, don't misunderstand. What I'm trying to say is that you're the Spring Light Palace Lord, so you should have a lot of good stuff to help Feng Wuyao with. Hence, I don't want you to leave just like that. At the very least, you should hand over some resources before you leave. And Lin looked at Yin Shuqin with an expectant expression. Yin Shuqin's mouth was slightly agape, as if she had heard it wrong. She was stunned for a few seconds. Puff! Yang Lingqian couldn't help but burst into laughter. Yin Shuqin's snow-white face was flushed with shame and indignation. I've already sacrificed my body, and you're only interested in my money." She felt very wronged, but she didn't dare to get angry. She could only purse her lips and look at Lin silently. All right. It's just a matter of money, and you look so wronged? It seems that talking about money hurts feelings. All right, you can go. I won't make things difficult for you." And Lin waved his hand and said, "You're free now." Freedom. And Lin's words made Yin Shuqin's heart tremble again. Yin Shuqin looked at the man in front of her who had a warm smile on his face. His smile was sincere and pure. After a long while, a genuine smile finally appeared on her face, and she felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Freedom. This was something that she didn't even dare to think about in the past. That's right, it was all over. She was still feeling quite uneasy, and just when she was about to be trapped in a cage, the man before her had smashed it into smithereens. It was such a simple and beautiful ending. "Thank you for your kindness, white-robed, exalted immortal." Yin Shuqin extended another graceful curtsy. Her smile was vibrant and enchanting, and she was like a celestial maiden from the heavens. "All right, you can go now." And Lin still had many other things to do. Yin Shuqin made her way out of the palace before turning around with a smile on her face. "White-robed, exalted immortal, if you want to continue fighting for the liberation of oppressed women, I can help you." And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. He didn't know what she meant by this, but he still asked, "Is it free?" Yin Shuqin. "Free." She thought to herself for a moment before adding, "On the Divine Source continent, female cultivators are still a little inferior to male cultivators. Hence, I want to fight for the best for all female cultivators." "That's great." And Lin smiled. "Let's keep in touch in the future." Yin Shuqin nodded with a smile before flying up into the clouds and disappearing into the distance. Yin Shuqin has perfectly interpreted this poem. Yang Lingqian crossed her arms and harumphed coldly with displeasure. What a beautiful and charming poem. Yang Lingqian crossed her arms and harumphed coldly. At the same time, she was also cursing Yin Shuqin for flirting with Lin even before she left. How could she put on such an innocent facade? She's actually not as beautiful as you. And Lin suddenly turned around with a smile on his face. Yang Lingqian was a little taken aback by Lin's sudden words. When she finally came to her senses, a deep blush had already appeared on her face. "WH, what are you saying?" "My God, Lin is saying that I'm more beautiful than Yin Shuqin? Is this what they mean by beauty is in the eye of the beholder?" Yang Lingqian was already screaming internally. At the same time, her heart rate accelerated, and she became a little flustered. What should I say? What should I do? Before she had a chance to do anything, and Lin continued, "You're more straightforward and honest than her. You also have a good personality, so you're naturally more beautiful than Yin Shuqin." Yang Lingqian, "Here, this pair of bracelets suits you very well. I'll give them to you as a token of my appreciation for your cooperation during this period of time." And Lin handed a pair of bracelets to Yang Lingqian. "These are Heavenly Flame Red Heart bracelets." Yang Lingqian stared at the bracelets with incredulity on her face. These are immortal tools." She was a little hesitant, as if she didn't want to accept such an expensive gift. In the Divine Source continent, even exalted immortals of the return to Void stage might not possess immortal tools. She was only a cultivator at the spirit nurturing pinnacle stage. "I told you to accept it, so don't be so polite. Do I really need an immortal tool?" And Lin couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of Yang Lingqian's flustered and fearful expression. He picked up her slender hand and put the bracelets on. "Not bad. You're a flame cultivator, so your red dress matches the Heavenly Flame Red Heart bracelets very well." And Lin nodded with satisfaction at the sight of the crimson bracelets on Yang Lingqian's slender wrists. Yang Lingqian stared at the bracelets in her hands with a dazed expression. She spun around gracefully, her posture elegant and graceful. She raised her hand and looked up at the bracelet that shone brightly under the sunlight. She couldn't help but smile. Light danced in the air, and a red fragrance wafted toward her. It was as if she were a beauty, and the fragrance of pearls and emeralds swept through the air. Yang Lingqian smiled. Thank you. If any of the palaces were illegally oppressing the mortals, they could also report them to the white-robed ambassadors, and the divine judgment palace would also be adjudicated. Regardless of whether they were powerful beings or ordinary commoners, all of them realized that the white-robed, exalted immortal really did want them to live better lives. Was this white-robed, exalted immortal a god sent by the heavens to save them? The white-robed, exalted immortal, and Lin, had really been deified. Not only were the people deified, but even the return to void stage exalted immortals were filled with reverence toward him. After the 4-9 Immortal Palace no longer interfered in the management of the regions, its status became even more transcendent, and it was like a superior version of the United Nations in the mortal world. The only difference was that this United Nations had absolute military might and executive power. Even though it didn't interfere in the management of the regions, it could command the entire world to obey. No matter who it was, they would choose to support a faction that had both strength and virtue. After that, some policies were enacted very smoothly. For example, they abolished kneeling and kowtowing, enacted all types of new laws, established the Women's Federation, and appointed Yin Shuqin as the chairperson of the Women's Federation. After that, the 4-9 Immortal Palace issued the 2-word Heavenly Book, which everyone recited. Prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, and the rule of law, no matter who it was, they would feel as if their entire body was enshrouded by the power of righteousness and righteousness, thereby repelling all evil. This was most likely a type of power of laws that had been born under the auspices of all living beings in this world. Once triggered, its effects would be boundless, and it had already become part of their values and beliefs. And Lin could see that a new world was gradually taking shape. Everything was so vibrant, and he felt a lot more at ease upon seeing this. Within the 4-9 Immortal Palace, I've done everything I could. I have a clear conscience after my trip to the Divine Source Continent, so it's time for me to go back. And Lin sipped his tea with a smile on his face. Yang Lingqian's hand faltered slightly as she looked at Lin. So soon? Why don't you stay a little longer? What will the 4-9 Immortal Palace do without you? She was the only person on this continent who knew the true identity of the white-robed, exalted immortal. She knew that the white-robed, exalted immortal and the Demon King Dan Lu were both powerful beings from the outside world. Chapter 1388. And Lin could see the reluctance in Yang Lingqian's eyes. He flicked Yang Lingqian's forehead with a smile. Don't be such a coward, okay? Without me, this world can still develop. The 4-9 Immortal Palace has over 100 Return to Void stage Exalted Immortals and 7 Exalted Immortals at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage. What are you afraid of? Yang Lingqian pursed her lips slightly, and she looked at Lin with her limpid eyes. But you're our pillar of support. Hey, you're already one of the 8 cabinets now. Grow up. And Lin said with a serious expression. All right. Yang Lingqian nodded lightly. Even though she was reluctant, she knew that she wouldn't be able to keep Lin. The 8 cabinet ministers were the highest authority in the 4-9 Immortal Palace, and they were comprised of the River God, Yin Ji, Wang Chun, Sun Biu, Luo Yin, Yin Shuqin, Yang Lingqian, and Peng Yuan. They were responsible for discussing and making decisions on important matters, and they were comprised of exalted immortals at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage. It could be said that Yang Lingqian was an adorable husky who had snuck into the crowd. She was very strange, but everyone respected her opinion. This was all because the white-robed, exalted immortal was standing behind this husky. Yang Lingqian's father, Yang Zheng, almost fell off his chair upon learning that his daughter had become one of the 8 ministers of the 4-9 Immortal Palace. He was so shocked that he almost fell off his chair, and he kowtowed to the portrait of the white-robed, exalted immortal over and over again. He didn't expect that the little bit of good karma he had sown in the small city he managed would bring him such a shocking blessing. If this wasn't smoke rising from his ancestral grave, then what was? Yang Zheng repeatedly told his daughter to repay the white-robed exalted immortal through voice transmission talismans. Yang Lingxian also wanted to, but she didn't have a chance. The white-robed exalted immortal was extremely powerful, and he was extremely wealthy. He had power, wealth, and women. How could she possibly repay him? She was on the verge of tears. Even if she said that she would devote her body to him, Enlin would not agree. After all, Enlin had previously dismissed more than 600 beauties from all over the continent who had volunteered to sleep with him. Yang Zheng heaved a resigned sigh upon hearing this. That's the best way to repay the white-robed exalted immortal, is to serve the people of the Eight Cabinet. The divine source continent had a new master. Mortals lived in peace and contentment, while cultivators were full of vigor. The revival of 10,000 sections. All the prodigies and goddesses of the continent appeared. Some of them had set their sights on the white-robed exalted immortal as their target, while others had their hearts set on him. In just 3 short months, the white-robed exalted immortal had become a household name. When his reputation was at its peak, the white-robed exalted immortal suddenly announced that he was going into seclusion to make a breakthrough. Also in seclusion with him was the equally renowned demon king of Danlu, Yishi. This incident shook the entire continent. No one knew how long Enlin was going to be in seclusion for, but the 4-9 Immortal Palace had already taken root in everyone's hearts. No matter how long Enlin would be in seclusion, the might of the 4-9 Immortal Palace would not diminish. On the heaven and earth altar of the Immortal King Palace, there stood a woman in a red dress. Before her were the renowned white-robed, exalted immortal and demon king Danlo. I can't believe that 3 months have passed in the blink of an eye. And Lin lamented. You sound like 3 months is a long time. I was afraid that a year wouldn't be enough. Ishi rolled his eyes, and Lin shook his head. I was planning to finish this in 3 days at most. If it weren't for the system, he wouldn't have needed so much time. After that, the 4-9 Immortal Palace took a lot of time to manage and improve the order of the entire continent. Fortunately, the results were good, and a new world was taking shape. Ishi was triggered by Lin's words again, and he paused momentarily before saying, "Let's activate the teleportation energy within our bodies and travel between the 2 worlds." The energy could only be maintained for a maximum of 1 year. However, they could choose to activate the energy earlier to return to the 4-9 Immortal Palace. And Lin and Ishi activated the energy within their bodies at the same time, and a summoning power descended from the sky. Boom, boom. A brilliant golden light enshrouded the 2 of them on the heaven and earth altar. Exalted Immortal and Lin, you have to come back often. I'll always be waiting for you at the 4-9 Immortal Palace. Yang Lingxian yelled in fear that Enlin wouldn't be able to hear her. Do your best and be an independent woman. Enlin encouraged with a smile. Yang Lingxian nodded, and tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the disappearing white-robed figure. She didn't know when she would be able to see him again, and she couldn't help but take a few steps forward. Exalted Immortal Enlin, can I hug you? Her courage was almost completely sapped by that one sentence. However, her eyes were still red, and she stared at the man enshrouded in golden light with reluctance in her eyes. Enlin faltered momentarily before opening his arms with a smile. Yang Lingxian pounced toward Enlin like a baby swallow, and she only had a split second to experience the sensation of the white-robed figure disappearing into specks of golden light. She stood rooted to the spot and stared at the empty heaven and earth altar, at a complete loss for what to do. All of a sudden, she felt a burst of warmth radiating from her wrist. Yang Lingxian looked down at the immortal bracelet on her wrist, and a faint smile finally appeared on her face. I'll definitely work hard in my cultivation. If my cultivation base is too low, I probably won't even be able to live until you return. Within the white nectar sea, a massive vortex suddenly appeared. The formation tremored violently. An elderly man who was resting on a sea turtle suddenly opened his eyes with excitement in his eyes. You're back after only 3 months? I wonder if the mission was completed. He stepped forward, and his body instantly traversed over 50 kilometers before landing on a massive jellyfish in the depths of the White Nectar Sea. He stared intently at the glowing spatial gate between the two realms with both excitement and nervousness in his eyes. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue's power had almost transcended the entire continent, but he was currently rubbing his hands together like a child. It could be said that the success or failure of this mission would determine the fate of the entire continent, so it was no wonder that he had become like this. Soon, two familiar figures appeared at the gate. Mr. and Lin, Ishi, I'm so glad you're both all right. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stroked his snowy white beard with an elated smile on his face. His eyes were squinted into slits, and he was grinning like an old baby. The two of them appeared to be in very good condition. Eliminating the possibility that they had encountered a life-or-death crisis, there was only one possibility. Master, we did it, Ishi chortled. Heavenly Lord of Tao and virtue, we were able to complete our mission. And Lin also bowed with a faint smile. It's all thanks to Brother and Lin's nature-defying combat prowess that we were able to slay that Tao integration stage super mighty figure. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to complete this mission. Ishi had no intention of claiming credit. Instead, he looked at Lin with reverence in his eyes. Ha ha! Great! The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue chuckled. At this moment, a rainbow divine light suddenly flashed in the air above the seabed. An extremely pleasant voice sounded from the sky above. Why don't you come to my house of life and discuss things in detail? And Lin felt extremely comfortable upon hearing this voice. Moreover, there was also an indescribable sense of closeness and intimacy. All right, let's go to Nuwa's room for a gathering. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue was in a very good mood, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Chapter 1389. Let's go to Nuwa's room. And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue's words. He was initially very nervous and scared, but then he was suddenly very excited. Don't get the wrong idea. It's just that he has never seen this legendary figure. Now that he finally had a chance to meet her, he was very excited. There were many legends about Nuwa. The most famous ones were none other than Nuwa's mending of the heavens and Nuwa's creation of humans. Nuwa created humans on Earth using the highly intelligent human race on the Taichu continent as the model. Nuwa created humans from clay and placed them on Earth. To put it more accurately, Earth was created by Nuwa. Nuwa mended the heavens to mend the flaws in the Taichu continent's heavenly Tao. This was a mess that the humans of the Purple Star civilization had stirred up, but Nuwa had to clean up after them. However, after mending the heavens, she only managed to delay the heavenly Tao backlash, thereby giving the mighty figure some time to prepare. In other words, she had mended an incomplete sky. Now that the crisis had reappeared, the situation was becoming more and more dire. Nuwa had once again appeared on the world stage. Apparently, she was the leader of the heaven-mending sect, while the Celestial Arch was her second in command. They had been preparing to mend the heavens this entire time. Furthermore, it was said that the establishment of the Celestial Court had a lot to do with Nuwa. The Buddhist kingdom of the Western Paradise's victorious Buddha, Sun Wukong, had also been born from her heaven-mending stone. And Lin thought to himself, this goddess of creation was extremely friendly toward the human race. Almost everything she did was beneficial to the human race. She was like a nursemaid to the human race who would come and feed them from time to time. He really didn't understand why she was so good to the human race. A rainbow divine light pierced through the seawater for tens of thousands of meters before arriving at wherein Lin and the others were situated. And Lin raised his head and could see an indistinct figure hovering directly above the White Nectar Sea. This was a lithe and graceful figure, and even looking at it from afar gave one a sense of tranquility. He didn't even have a chance to take a closer look before a burst of spatial power enshrouded his entire body. This was an extremely high-level spatial power. He didn't even have a chance to react before his vision warped and warped. The next time he opened his eyes, he was in a very stylish, small wooden house. As soon as Lin took a breath, he felt an indescribably fresh air flowing through his entire body. It was as if all the impurities on his body had been washed away, and he felt unprecedentedly relaxed and comfortable. Not only that, but all the cells in his body seemed to come alive. His mind was 100 times more energetic, and he was content and carefree. And Lin suddenly had a feeling that if he could breathe here for 10,000 years without doing anything, it would be super blissful. The wooden house's decorations were simple, but not simple. There was a simple painting, but the painting seemed to be a world that could be entered at any time. There was a simple tea table, and the tea in the small teacups was clear. The fragrance of the tea allowed him to determine that the tea leaves on the table were at least of the god level. The simple carved window exuded a divine aura. On the simple and exquisite dressing table, there were hundreds of flowers blooming under the moonlight in the mirror. The wind chimes were crisp and clear. When a gust of wind blew past, they would emit a simple yet pleasing sound that would intoxicate people. Yes, every item in the room seemed simple at first glance. But if one looked closely, they would all be able to discover something extraordinary about each item. Who would have thought that Nuwa would really let us into this room? The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue sat across from Enlin with a cheerful expression. He didn't forget to pour himself a cup of tea. It looked like this wasn't his first time here. After all, he had seen this house before. She sat off to the side and looked around curiously. It was clear that this was also his first time here, just like Enlin. Enlin couldn't help but look toward the bed behind the light curtains. Then his vision blurred and he went blind. Mr. Enlin, there are some things that you shouldn't look at. A teasing yet extremely gentle voice sounded beside his ear. The voice was clear and natural, and it was extremely comfortable to listen to. Enlin turned around and finally regained his vision. He apologized awkwardly. My apologies, senior. I was being presumptuous. It's all right. Let me introduce myself. I am Nuwa. The woman slowly walked out from behind the curtains. Enlin raised his head to discover a woman in a colorful dress making her way toward him. She had a long, slender neck, and a pair of well-proportioned legs were revealed. Even her beautiful feet were exuding a sense of seductive allure. Enlin raised his head and looked up to discover that a woman in a colorful dress was making her way toward him. Enlin couldn't help but gulp. Wasn't Nuwa supposed to have the tail of a snake and the body of a human? Why was she showing herself to others in human form? Nuwa wasn't actually the most beautiful woman. In fact, she could only rank third among all the women he had seen. The first was Su Xiaolan, and the second was Chang'e. Her facial features were so exquisite that they didn't have any flaws. Furthermore, they looked extremely natural. Although they weren't so mesmerizing that they would make others fall head over heels for her, they would still be able to move their hearts even after looking at her for 10,000 years. Her skin was white and flawless, and her divine body seemed to be made by the heavens. Standing in the world, she was the most beautiful scenery in the world. It was as if she was the darling of heaven and earth. This was a true goddess, a goddess that people couldn't even think of desecrating. Enlin thought of many things in that instant. Nuwa sat off to the side with a smile on her face as she appraised Enlin with curiosity in her eyes. What? Have you seen enough? What rank do you think my appearance is? Nuwa asked with a smile. Enlin came back to his senses in that instant. His expression became even more awkward. It was as if his thoughts had been seen through. He only felt that it was very rude. He replied honestly, "You're more beautiful than all the women I've seen. Naturally, you're ranked first." TSK. How shameless. A cold and hostile voice suddenly came from behind him. Enlin turned his head. When he saw who it was, his expression changed again. This was an exquisitely beautiful woman in a light black dress. Her long, straight, black hair hung down her waist. She was looking at Enlin with a cold and disdainful expression. "Black Spirit Snake, you're here as well?" Enlin was shocked. He thought to himself, enemies really don't meet each other. It had only been a short while, and he had already encountered this killer again. Before Enlin had a chance to feel fear, another voice sounded. "Were you calling shameless? Mr. Enlin is speaking the truth. Hurry up and pour tea for our guests." Nuwa chided. Black Spirit Snake, Enlin was ecstatic. Her Majesty Nuwa was such a good support. This time, all he had to do was suck up to Her Majesty Nuwa. What could this stinky snake do to him? Black Spirit Snake made her way over with an aggrieved expression before pouring tea for Nuwa, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, Ishi, and Enlin. Black Spirit Snake almost couldn't control herself at the sight of that sly smile. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue chuckled as if he had just witnessed a good show. Nuwa smiled. All right, there are no outsiders here. Bring out your heavenly Tao fragment. Chapter 1390. Black Spirit Snake was brewing tea, and she turned to look at Enlin with her dark eyes. She knew about Enlin's mission to the divine source continent, and she was also very curious about what this so-called heavenly Tao fragment looked like. Enlin placed his supreme-grade storage ring onto the table. The heavenly Tao fragment inside has both a physical and an incorporeal form. It's very peculiar and unpredictable. Your Majesty Nuwa, make sure you don't let it get away. Nuwa smiled. Don't worry, I brought you to this cabin of life to release the heavenly Tao fragment. I have the final say in this eternal space. When she said this, her face was full of confidence. It was quite clear that this cabin of life had its own unique characteristics. Enlin was relieved to hear this. He looked into his storage ring to find that the heavenly Tao fragment was suspended in the air like a white crystal, exuding what appeared to be clouds and mist that revolved around its body. With a thought, he took out the heavenly Tao fragment. Everything fell silent as soon as the fragment was brought out. The flowers in the dressing table disappeared, and the wind chimes outside the cabin stopped ringing. It was as if this fragment was the only thing left in this world. Both the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue and Nuwa were momentarily dazed. They had both been entranced by the unique aura emanating from the heavenly Tao fragment. It was also at this moment that the heavenly Tao fragment flashed, and it became incorporeal before flying into the distance. Don't even think about getting away. Nuwa came to her senses in an instant, and she let loose a clear cry as she made an ancient seal with one hand. An ancient and boundless power emanated from the cabin, as if it had become its own world. The heavenly Tao fragment crashed into the wall of the cabin, and its body shuddered violently as it revealed its true form. Nuwa flipped a hand over, and the heavenly Tao fragment struggled violently, but it was unable to resist a certain power and slowly flew toward Nuwa's hand. She finally caught the heavenly Tao fragment, and the reflection of the heavenly Tao fragment appeared in her eyes. All of a sudden, the reflection of the fragment disappeared from her eyes. Instead, her eyes became emerald, as if she were caressing her own child. It is indeed the missing fragment of the heavenly Tao. I can sense it, Nuwa murmured as she stroked it with her slender fingers in an extremely gentle manner, as if she was caressing her own child. Black Spirit Snake leaned against the table and propped her chin in her hands as she stared at the heavenly Tao fragment with an entranced expression. It's so beautiful. I really want to look at it forever. Won't you be able to look at it every day after it fuses with the heavenly axiom? Nuwa laughed. Black Spirit Snake pouted. That's different. And Lin was a little surprised to see Black Spirit Snake like this. This was the first time he had seen Black Spirit Snake behaving like a little girl, and he felt like the contrast was quite stark. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stroked his beard and said, with the heavenly Tao fragment, the heavenly Tao's flaw has already been fixed. We've also prepared quite a lot of materials to mend the heavens. Now, I'm still missing the most important link, which is the power of Tao that's lacking in the heavenly Tao. Nuwa nodded before turning to Enlin and Ishi with a warm smile on her face. This is all thanks to your efforts, Enlin and Ishi. Come, tell me what happened to you guys on the Divine Source Continent. The two of them recounted everything that had happened on the Divine Source Continent to Nuwa. Nuwa's expression shifted slightly upon hearing that Fengwia had already progressed to the Tao integration stage. No wonder all of the powerful beings we sent out failed and perished. There really are living beings who have progressed to the Tao integration stage. Black Spirit Snake was also a little astonished as she stared at Enlin. You've only just progressed to the return to void stage not long ago, but you're already able to defeat doubt integration stage super mighty figures? A smug smile appeared on Lin's face. What's so strange about that? I'm quite proficient in battle. How about a sparring match? Black Spirit Snake was itching to have a go. No, and Lin immediately refused. Black Spirit Snake, and Lin wasn't an idiot. Feng Weia was a very weak Dao integration stage, super mighty figure, but Black Spirit Snake was a mighty figure who could match the legendary battling Buddha and was Nuwa's right-hand man. How could they possibly be on the same level? Black Spirit Snake was only looking for an opportunity to beat him up. All right, little Black, stop messing around. Mr. Enlin, please continue. Nuwa still wanted to hear the story, and she turned to Enlin with a teary expression. Enlin was a little embarrassed by her gaze, and he continued to recount his experiences on the Divine Source continent. He had already obtained a fragment of the Heavenly Tao, so why was Her Majesty Nuwa still so curious about what had happened there? Enlin also told her about how he had established the 4-9 Immortal Palace, liberated the oppressed female cultivators, re-established order on the continent, and reformed the governing system. Nuwa listened with rapt attention. She also told her about Enlin's heroic feat of mending the heavens with a single sword strike. Nuwa looked at Enlin and the evil-slaying sword on Enlin's back with a hint of surprise on her face. Your sword looks so special. Can I touch it? Enlin's body shuddered upon hearing this, and he immediately grabbed onto the sword on his back before injecting his divine weapon origin energy into it. Little Xie let out a soft moan of comfort. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief as a smile appeared on his face. Nuwa and the Heavenly Lord of Tao and Virtue were all dumbstruck. I'm sorry, Senior Nuwa. My sword spirit is very afraid of strangers, so I won't be able to touch it, Enlin said with an apologetic expression. A warm smile appeared on Nuwa's face. That's all right. Enlin continued with his story, and he turned to Nuwa with a curious expression. Your Majesty Nuwa, if I want to return to the Divine Source continent, what do I have to do to get there? Nuwa stretched out her slender fingertip, and a golden light flashed. A golden crystal appeared in front of her fingertip. Enlin's expression immediately shifted upon seeing the golden crystal and sensing the familiar energy fluctuations emanating from it. That's a Golden Realm Essence Crystal. Could it be that I only need Golden Realm Essence Crystals to enter? 3 Golden Realm Essence Crystals are only the base. You also need to refine a Realm Stone. It's exactly because Realm Stones are extremely rare that the Heavenly Lord of Tao and I have only given our subordinates a dozen or so opportunities to enter, Nuwa explained. Enlin's heart jolted upon hearing this. A single Golden Realm Essence Crystal was already worth over 1 million Spirit Stones. It looked like the price to enter was indeed a little high. However, Nuwa looked at the Heavenly Tao fragment and said, that's not necessarily the case anymore. Enlin's interest was immediately piqued. One had to realize that his 4-9 Immortal Palace was still there. Nuwa explained, because the Heavenly Tao fragment has been retrieved, the rift in the sky has been mended, and a Tao integration stage super mighty figure has been born on that continent. The level of the world has become higher, and all of these changes have made that world even more perfect. Thanks to these improvements, the passageway between the two worlds has also become more stable. Perhaps the passageway between the two worlds will become a normal passageway in the near future. Enlin heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. It was fine as long as they could get back to that continent. Nuwa put the Heavenly Tao fragment away into the flower bracelet on her wrist with a smile. Enlin, Ishi, I should also thank you for retrieving the Heavenly Tao fragment. I'll give each of you a divine item. Chapter 1391. Enlin was ecstatic upon seeing this. A present from Nuwa had to be extremely valuable. Thank you, Your Majesty Nuwa. Enlin immediately extended a salute. He would be a fool not to take advantage of such an opportunity. Thank you, Your Majesty Nuwa. Ishi was also very elated. Here, this myriad soul holy herb is yours. You can use it to refine pills. Nuwa handed a divine rank herb to Ishi. Ishi accepted the herb with a wide grin on his face, and his eyes were about to disappear. Unlin, this heavenly stone is imbued with my chaotic power and can defend against attacks from Dao integration stage mighty figures. You can also use it as a rock to inflict lethal damage on your enemies. It can be used a total of 10 times, so it's a very good, life-saving treasure. Niwa handed a gray stone to Enlin. Those who didn't know what it was might think that it was a random rock that had been picked up off the street. However, Enlin could sense extremely terrifying energy fluctuations imbued within the stone. "Thank you, Your Majesty Niwa." Enlin repressed the excitement in his heart as he accepted the heavenly stone. This was the first time he had received a gift from a god of creation. He didn't know how powerful it was, but he could find an unlucky bastard to test it out on next time. "Little Black, pour Enlin another cup of tea," Niwa instructed with a warm smile. Black Spirit Snake's expression darkened as she continued to pour tea for Enlin. Never would Enlin have thought that the domineering Black Spirit Snake would pour tea for him in such an obedient manner. This was a very strange and exhilarating feeling. After that, they chatted about other things at the tea table. Niwa even asked Enlin if he was interested in joining the heaven-mending sect. Enlin then turned her down in a euphemistic manner again. Come to think of it, this was quite interesting. The heaven-mending sect and the heaven-crushing sect had both invited him over. Was he really that popular? Half a day later, Niwa escorted Enlin out of the cabin of life. Enlin walked through the spatial gate to find that he had already arrived above a blue sky and a picturesque floating continent. It was a very familiar place. It was the campus where he had lived for nearly 5 years. "Enlin, my young friend, enjoy your graduation ceremony." On the other side of the portal, Goddess Nviwa smiled gently and waved her hand. Whoosh! The portal shrank. The goddess of creation was nowhere to be seen. Graduation ceremony? Enlin was stunned. At this moment, the sound of fireworks and the cheers of the students came from afar. Holy shit! I graduated? Enlin was given a massive fright. Only at this moment did he suddenly realize that more than 3 months had already passed since he had entered the Divine Source continent. Time had truly passed far too quickly. Enlin became a little melancholic. He hadn't prepared himself at all, and he had graduated just like that. You always say that graduation is so far away, and in the blink of an eye, we go our separate ways on the white stone square of Xiaoxian United University. Nearly 10,000 fifth-year graduates were gathered here. All of them wore white Taoist robes with red borders. This was their graduation uniform. This was the first time that all of the students had worn such a uniform. The male students were all handsome and dashing, while the female students were all adorable and adorable. This was a rare sight on the campus. Principal Wang Xinyu gave a speech on stage. All of the students were listening with rapt attention. As expected, today was the last day of their reunion on the campus. From tomorrow onward, they would be graduating students of the United University of Cultivation. However, none of the students were very excited as they felt like something was missing. I just want to see War God and Lin one last time before I graduate. Why can't I even fulfill this small wish of mine? A female student said with a forlorn expression. Sigh. And Lin is a man of great ambition, so it's understandable that he doesn't appear on the campus. A male student said with a hint of disappointment on his face. That's right. They were all disappointed that the legendary man didn't appear at the graduation ceremony to celebrate their last day together. That's all right. If you want to see him, you can go to the Celestial Court or the 4-9 Immortal Sect. You'll have a chance to see him there. At this moment, within the first class of students. Don't worry, classmate Xiaolan. Perhaps Enlin will be back soon. Su Qinyun wore a loose Taoist robe, and she clumsily offered words of consolation as she patted the female student beside her on the shoulder. Who's worried about him? I'm just angry. He doesn't even tell me what he's doing. When he comes back, he's going to kneel on the diamond lava durian. An angry pink appeared on Su Xiaolan's face, and she looked up into the sky as she spoke, as if she really was hoping that he would suddenly come back at this moment. That's right. Why would our classmate Xiaolan be worried about Enlin? A playful smile appeared on Xin Yuan Cheng's handsome face. When Enlin suddenly disappeared, she went to ask everyone in the celestial court, from the 5 emperors to all the immortals, just so she could ferret out Enlin and give him a good beating. How is she going to appease her anger if she doesn't get him a good beating? An expression of extreme anticipation appeared on his face as he spoke. Su Xiaolan, now, let us invite the outstanding student representatives of the Celestial Court and Xiaoxian United University to deliver a graduation speech. Vice Principal Yu Hua announced. Close to 10,000 students applauded in unison. Some of the students who were feeling a little down also perked up a little. Upon hearing this, Su Xiaolan stepped into the air and landed on the platform. Her white robe was like the clouds with fiery red edges. She wore an intricate Taoist robe, and she didn't put on any facial expressions, but she was already as beautiful as a celestial maiden. Su Xiaolan's entrance was very simple, but it still stunned countless students and teachers alike. She had perfectly integrated her true dragon bloodline and vermilion burr bloodline, and both her disposition and appearance had become even more regal and holy, as if she were a high and mighty holy maiden. Everyone was tempted to look at her, but at the same time, they didn't dare to approach her. Only her friends who were familiar with her knew that Su Xiaolan hadn't changed in the slightest. She was gentle when she needed to be, and explosive when she needed to be. She was still the adorable little celestial maiden of the past. Su Xiaolan looked up into the sky again before grumbling in a quiet voice, sighed, "You're not here, so I have to do all this manual labor. I just want to be an ordinary little chef." And in Lin's absence, she was the most outstanding student, so she naturally took over in Lin's position and delivered the student representative speech. "Greetings, esteemed leaders, teachers, and dear students. I am Su Xiaolan from Class 1. Everyone says that the path of cultivation is a long one, and 5 years is but a drop in the ocean. However, these 5 years are destined to be unforgettable for all of us. We've had a warm and beautiful daily cultivation life, but we've also experienced thrilling battles." Su Xiaolan was just delivering her graduation speech when she suddenly raised her head and looked up into the distance. An extremely moving smile appeared on her face, and all of her previous worries and anger were instantly erased. The only emotion she was feeling was joy. Her eyes had already curved into crescent moons. "You're back." Chapter 1392. Who's back? All of the teachers and students thought of one person at the same time upon seeing Su Xiaolan suddenly burst out with such a joyful smile on her face. It's War God Enlin. It must be classmate Enlin. My God, where is he? Where is he? All of the teachers and students began to stir as they looked up into the sky. A white figure approached from afar. He had a handsome face and a huge black brick. That's right, it was still the same as before. Cheers and whistles erupted from the crowd. This was a much more enthusiastic scene than when the principal was giving a speech. Enlin was also startled by the enthusiastic students. He then greeted them with a joyful expression. "Hi everyone, long time no see. I've missed you." Right at this moment, his heart suddenly thumped as a sense of danger welled up in his heart. A black that was flying toward him. Enlin instinctively reached out to grab it to find that it was an intricate white Taoist robe with red edges. "What are you talking about? Don't disturb the order of the graduation ceremony. Hurry up and change your clothes and listen to me." An extremely domineering and arrogant voice suddenly sounded. Enlin's body trembled, and his previous domineering aura instantly disappeared. He hurriedly replied, "Sorry, classmate Xiaolan, I'll change right away." His body shook as he spoke, and he instantly changed into his outfit. Then he obediently stood among the students of Class 1 and listened to the lecture with an obedient expression. All of the teachers and students couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing this. In the entire school, the only one who could deal with Enlin was probably the woman on the stage. Su Xiaolan tried her best not to laugh upon seeing Enlin like this. She then began her speech as the student representative with a serious expression. "As for letting Enlin speak, that's impossible. You can't just push away this kind of opportunity and have it whenever you want. Since you're late, then you'll just have to stay down there. Su Xiaolan's tone of voice became much lighter. Perhaps the boulder hanging over her heart had finally been lifted. She had once again become the little fairy with a bright smile that could warm people's hearts. And Lin looked at the beautiful woman on the stage and felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. He felt that his experience at Xiaoxing United University was finally without any regrets. Not only did he not have any regrets, but the students also had no regrets. The goal they were striving for, the person they admired the most, was now standing on the white stone square, taking the oath and graduating together with them. That was great. After Su Xiaolan finished her speech, the graduation ceremony entered the next stage. She walked back into the crowd and looked at Enlin with an unfriendly gaze. Xiaolan, let me explain, Enlin urged. All right, you have to give me a good explanation tonight. I'll use the vermilion bird mirror, but if you're lying, then you can kneel on the diamond lava durian. Su Xiaolan harumphed coldly. Enlin, Xiaolan was becoming more and more difficult to deal with. She had even mastered the vermilion bird mirror's lie detector. How about he smash the vermilion bird mirror first, then tell Xiaolan that the vermilion bird mirror was accidentally damaged? After the students' speeches, the Celestial Court Immortal began his Tao lecture. In the past, only celestial immortals at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage attended this event. However, the Celestial Arch was here in person today. His lecture was concise and easy to understand, but it was imbued with the intent of the Great Tao. Regardless of the cultivation base of the students, they would all be able to attain enlightenment from his lecture. Even Enlin and Su Xiaolan were very enlightened by his lecture. Finally, a golden graduation certificate descended from the sky and landed in the hands of each student. Each certificate had the corresponding information of each student. This was a symbol of an experience, as well as a symbol of glory. The cover of the graduation certificate was engraved with the words "The United University of Cultivation Graduation Certificate" in gold. The words were written in flamboyant calligraphy, exuding a sense of pride and arrogance. The words "Protect the Kingdom of the Nine States, Revive the Human Race" were engraved on the back of the certificates. Xiaoxing United University was a school of the entire Kingdom of the Nine States, and prodigies came from all over the continent. It was no longer a school or sect that could control the entire human race. Enlin flipped open his graduation certificate to see the face of a young man. His face was filled with a hint of fear and unease, but also a hint of yearning. Enlin came to his senses. Wasn't this a photo taken when he first entered the university? How did it end up on his graduation certificate? Su Xiaolan gloated at the sight of Enlin's dumbstruck expression. When we took our graduation photos, you were nowhere to be seen, so we had to use the photo you took when you first came in. Enlin smiled helplessly. That's not a bad thing. I look back at myself in the past, and only now do I realize how much I've grown in the past 5 years. Su Xiaolan pinched Enlin's face with a slender hand. You're getting more and more shameless. You've become invulnerable in just 5 years. Enlin didn't back down, and he pinched Su Xiaolan's delicate face with an amused expression. You're getting more and more daring. You dare to tease me in public? Do you think I, Enlin, don't dare to show off my power? Let go. Su Xiaolan struggled. I'm not letting go. Enlin used the same method that he used on little Xie to knead Su Xiaolan's face into all kinds of shapes. He then unsheathed his dragon sparrow sword. Enlin apologized in public with a humiliated expression. Big brother, and let's take a photo together. A voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Enlin turned to discover a cultured and refined man with a feather fan in his hand looking at him. Beside him, there was a young girl with a sweet smile, a cold and gorgeous big-breasted girl, and a tall and sturdy man. Sure, Enlin replied with a smile. The four of them were none other than Zhong Yongyan, Miao Tian, Sun Xinglian, and Luo Zipping. He and the four of them happily took a photo together using photographic crystals, one for each of them. After all, they had graduated, so graduation photos were naturally the most enjoyable thing for graduates. Immediately afterward, Enlin took a photo with Lu Debao, who had become tan from cultivating the Divine Sun technique. When Lu Debao first entered the university, he was at the bottom of his grade. Now, however, He was already an exceptional student of the 10th stage Tao body. This also dispelled Lin's suspicions that Liu Debao wasn't perfected Master Yu Ding's biological son. Thinking back, Liu Debao was Lin's first formidable opponent on his path of cultivation. Lin and I were evenly matched. He could probably brag about this for many years. Zhao Huayin also came to take a photo with Lin, and even said that he wanted to take a photo with Dabai. Lin felt like he had ulterior motives. However, Lin wasn't afraid that Dabai would be snatched away. Dabai was now dead set on him. He woke up Dabai, who was sleeping soundly in the attic, and they took a photo together. Snap! Dabai's adorable appearance was recorded in Zhao Huayin's photographic crystal. Then, Su Xiaolan, Xinyuan Cheng, and Su Qinyun also took a photo with Lin. Lin and Su Xiaolan were like a celestial couple, and they rode on Dabai lovingly. Su Qinyun stood off to the side, and she gently stroked Dabai's head with a breathtaking smile on her face. Xinyuan Cheng stood on the other side of Dabai, and his back was against Dabai. His perfect profile was revealed, and he turned toward the camera with a gentle and warm expression. Snap! The image froze in this instant. Lin had graduated.